Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 24th of November 2003 meeting of Powys County Council Governance and Audit Committee. I'm going to take item 1 first, and that's apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Graham Breeze and from Councillor Ange, who will be attending the meeting, but she has another engagement first, so she will be joining us in the chamber following her other meeting. And we have Councillor Gareth, Chris and William joining us online. Connor, could you give us any other apologies, please?
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillors Jackie Charlton, Cabinet Member for Greener Powys, and then Catherine James, Head of Transformation and Democratic Services, Craig Flynn, Deputy Head of Finance, Gareth Lewis, Audit Wales, Bets Ingram, Strategic Equalities and Risk Officer, and then Councillor James Gibson-Watt, Leader, has given his apologies. He may be able to join remotely for the AGS item, and then Councillor Jake Berryman may also be able to join us for his item as well.
Thank you, and I believe Councillor Gwynfor and Councillor Allard are likely to join us for item 9 on the swap schools items. Thanks very much, Connor. Item 2, disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest from anyone in the chamber or online in connection with the items to be considered today? No. Moving on to agenda item 3, the minutes of the 29th of September and the action log. We'll run through the minutes first of all, and then subject to points of correction, clarification and matters arising, we'll seek to approve the minutes. I then want to ask Connor if he would share his screen so that we can take a run through the action log, as I believe it does need a bit of updating. But first of all, the minute from the 29th of September. So, Councillor Peat.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On page 25 of the minutes, there was reference to the Red Dragon development case study that was due to come for this meeting. Unfortunately, it's not on the agenda. I have had a subsequent conversation with Kevin Price of SWAP to provide some background information behind the case, but I guess I just wanted to express my frustration that this isn't actually on the agenda as agreed at the last meeting, because it is an issue of quite high importance for some of my constituents who are subcontractors. The other related point to it as well, if I may, is on page 21 of the minutes. There is reference again to the Red Dragon in relation to contracts and procurement risk, and I think we are due an update from the SWAP Assistant Director there to report back on his findings, and I just wanted to clarify when that will be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peat, and I take my part in the oversight for Red Dragon for not chasing that on behalf of all members. But we're on the case now, Councillor Peat. You have every assurance. I can see that Jane wants to come in.
Just to briefly update you, yes, we have taken that piece of work forward. We have had to slot it into the audit plan amongst the other priorities, and that has taken a little bit longer than we would have anticipated, but I can assure you that the scope of the work is out, and I know your input as to whether that scope covers all the issues that you raised will be greatly appreciated, and then we can move forward with that work.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. Yeah, if I may as well, Chair. Sorry, two bites or 3 bites at the cherry, I guess. Could it also be added onto our forward work plan? I know we'll talk about that later, but just need to get it there so as we've got it. Thank you.
Yes, of course, Councillor Peter. It will be added to the forward work plan, and it is our intention to have the item on the agenda at our January meeting. and we're asking officers to expedite everything to deliver that accordingly, given the delay that we have already encountered. So I hope if we can achieve that, that will be some redress to the oversight. Just turning the pages quickly, please, in the chamber and online, any comments or points of clarification, further matters arising from members as we go through the minutes, please. I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, are members therefore content to approve the minute and enable them to be signed? John's moved. Do we have a seconder? And Councillor Pete has seconded. Thank you very much, colleagues, for that discussion on the minutes. Connor, could you please share your screen and let's have a look at the action log, please. Oh, sorry, it looks completely different from what I've got in my hands. So yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, go through what's in the agenda pack then, because I don't think it's even in the same order.
You know, you need to
Yeah, yeah. A general comment, but I think we need to abide by. We've got completion date and committee date, but I think we also need in the table a target date or an expected deadline, because it's too easy for people who are busy to not complete. But if they have got a deadline and they know that colleagues are going to chase, it might make them a bit more diligent. So there we have the red dragon item at the top. So that is, we've discussed that already, and we're aiming to have a discussion at our meeting in January. The next item is the Director of Social Services and Housing agreed to provide a response regarding the position of DBS and other safeguards where the council provided accommodation to 16 to 17-year-olds experiencing homelessness. We haven't had that one. Nina?
Good morning, Boarda. Chair, I can provide that update verbally now, or would you prefer me to add it to the tracker?
Just give us a quick update if you can, Nina.
Yeah, absolutely. As part of, we obviously use bed and breakfasts to for our homeless presentations in a last resort. When that happens, the Housing Services Environmental Health Officers undertake a B&B suitability for homeless assessment. As part of that assessment, a self-declaration is included about in terms of convictions, criminal records, etc. So that self-declaration process is in place and has been for a number of years. For homeless, but I just wanted to confirm that at the moment, the teams are only placing 16 and 17-year-olds in beds and breakfasts where DBS checks have been undertaken, but I have asked for this to be reviewed. So there is work ongoing with the team to review that self-assessment and self-declaration process. So thank you very much for raising the question. And also just to assure you that obviously within all of our supported housing schemes, all the staff are obviously DBS checked there as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Nina, much appreciated. The next one, Jane, is a commercial update. And that's linked to commercial and procurement and risk relating to contractor insolvency, project bank accounts, etc., which links back to Red Dragon.
Yeah.
So we've covered that too. New ways of working presentation. This is linked to our discussion on flexi time. So we may not get an update today.
It's January.
January. Sorry, it's down for January. Moving on. SWOT completed. Oh, it's the blue one, sorry. Strategic risk report, Wix. When we get to the strategic risk register, I've been making some inquiries about that. I'll update then. But really, just a source of frustration, I have to say. But I think that I'd probably like the committee to have a further risk deep dive on that. Review the content and expiry of the income management policy.
Yeah, if I can give a quick update on that. I think Councillor Peat noted that it had been quite a while since it had been refreshed. So that work is currently being undertaken, and then we'll ensure that that policy gets added to the register of policies so that we can do that more routinely. I think that, as I said, I think the context of the policy has remained roughly the same, but it is important to review it periodically and make sure it's as up to date as it needs to be. So that's happening.
Right, okay. The closed risk. Oh, we'll do that at another meeting. We'll do that on the 8th of December. That's what we're going to do on the 8th of December. So that can go in as a target date. That's a confidential item on the strategic risk register, which we will do on the 8th of December. The head of finance would contact the monitoring officer to report on terms of reference and constitution update. That's been done. That's been done, so that can be marked as done. We did that at our last meeting. The next one, oh Connor, you just moved it and I've lost my place. It's okay. Covered. So which one are we on now? Risk register.
Yeah, talking about procurement.
Procurement.
Red Dragon again.
Red Dragon again, okay. Which one are we on? Connor, they don't have numbers.
Sustainable powers.
So sustainable powers, that was the committee would like to be regularly updated on the status of sustainable powers and progress against it for assurance purposes. So that's really a forward work programme.
Chair.
Gareth?
Could I comment on that one? Yeah.
Of course you can.
I think most of us attended that initial meeting in the hall in Llandrindod here. It whetted our appetites, but there's been a bit of radio silence. But I understand there's an awful lot of work going on in the background. We've had one update from Jane, but if there is extra work going on, we'd like to keep abreast of it, because I think this committee could inform that process rather than comment after the event.
Thank you, Gareth. I'll ask Jane to respond to that for now.
Thank you, Councillor Gareth. And yes, there is a lot going on, I'm pleased to say. We will be doing regular updates across all members. And I think it's really important then that the independent members of this committee get invited to those briefings. So I think that's probably the most appropriate. You'll see a lot more depth then than we could potentially cover at this committee.
Thank you.
This, the next item is something that came up in our self-assessment. It's around public engagement with this committee and our ongoing training programme, which we do need to set some dates for that, Connor, please. Because we undertook a skills assessment more than a year ago now, colleagues, and we need to refresh that and have a look at a particular training programme for this committee, and think about how we engage members of the public in our work. We can have a further discussion on that, please. And then this item, oh yeah, this is really about the length of our agendas and seeking other ways to manage the agenda, which I think we will continue to discuss, but my sense at the moment is the weight of business for this committee is high, and it's important that we have adequate time to properly consider the papers that are put before us, and it's actually really disrespectful to colleagues if they prepare papers and put a lot of work into things that we are going to examine and then we dust it off really, really quickly. So that's quite a conundrum, but Connor, for a discussion between myself and the team, please. And then we are on fraud report. This is in connection with us not agreeing the monitoring officer's suggestion. Oh, this was about the drafting of the public service ombudsman, and Clive came back and said the public service ombudsman could not do what we asked in terms of general guidance. So we were going to ask, in the absence of that, if Clive could email members. That's been done, right? Okay. Okay, can you roll this one up, Connor? Oh. And which one are we on now? Fraud report.
Report fraud button.
Report fraud button.
That's in place. Yeah.
Right, okay, so there's another one that's in place. And then we are on consider liaison between lessons learned report for corporate complaints with strategic risk to identify any links. Is anyone doing that?
Oh, because they're doing some more work.
Okay, well, can we have a date in there? Have another column with dates, Connor, so that we can properly keep track of this, and where risks, where actions have been done, just take them off so that we can really home in on outstanding things, please. And then the next one is about risk management training. We've had that conversation. So the next few are closed, aren't they? And then Audit Wales to advise. Review completed information on financial sustainability data tool.
That's the national tool.
That's the national tool. So we'll need to, well, Jane, if you could maybe have a separate conversation with Audit Wales. I won't bring them in just now.
Okay.
Pete, your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry, it was a long time ago now.
Oh,
Apologies.
sorry.
No,
Right,
not your
good.
fault. No. Just it's not on this point. It was just quickly back to the policies. I just want to check, what's the review process after you've done the updates, Jane? Does that go back to sign that off?
Yeah, it would go through the corporate leadership team. So they would sign off any new policies, and if they are subject to scrutiny, so it depends very much on changes and so on, they will go to the relevant scrutiny committee. So there is a register. That register now gives prompts when policies are due for renewal. So we've really tightened up that whole policy review. But of course, you need to make sure the policies are on the register. So that has been really tightened.
Thank very much, thanks. Then the next, there's a few that have been discharged. Then the working group feedback template, we've got one of them, so that's been discharged. Committee to further discuss school budgets for a risk deep dive. We can add that, and actually today's agenda item. Today's agenda item 9 gives us the opportunity to touch on that as well. The chair to write to the cabinet to ask them to consider accountability and sightedness. Oh yeah, we've done that.
Yeah.
That was the risk we've done that ages ago. Head of finance to progress outstanding actions to record. What is that about, Jane? I don't even know what that's about. Right, okay, Jane, can I leave that with you? SWAT, deprivation of liberty, assurance to be provided at the end of a 12. That's for a redoing, isn't it? Yep. So if we can have dates in there. Following corporate safeguarding board. Well, we do get a regular update on that. Well, that's been done. Ukraine assistant director indicated that he would review how. I'm not sure what that is either. Can we look at that outside of this meeting? The one that mentions Ukraine. That Ian, that's something to do with you because it's a swap. Have a go back. It would be helpful if some work could be undertaken to identify how audit recommendations were recognised in risk registers. That's really important. So I would like a date on that and some work done on that, because that is about the cycle between setting objectives, identifying the risks that could influence achieving those objectives, and how those things are then audited. That is fundamental to the planning and audit cycle. And then there's something else about the statement of accounts and deliberate deprivation. That's been done. The deliberate deprivation of assets. We've had assurance on that. Care homes, which are subject to short-term tenure. Oh, a question as to whether that should be a separate risk distinction between. Yeah, I'm going to come back to this issue of the distinction between risks and issues, because again, when I was under agenda item 15, I do think we need to have that conversation again about the distinction between risks and issues, because it feels to me that an awful lot of things that are on our strategic risk register are here and now live issues that are being dealt with. So I really do think we need to have that conversation, perhaps in a development session with the new chief executive, but we really do need to attend to that, because it's really challenging, but we are dealing with these things now. Presentation by Audit Wales to the Committee on Cybersecurity. Audit Wales colleagues, do you know anything about that? No, none of them are volunteering. Connor, can you chase that up, please?
Was that an internal report rather than Audit Wales?
I don't know. Connor, can you check what that means? Copy members into an. Yeah, okay, so yeah, and that the last item there is really about ensuring that lay members are kept up to date with issues where elected members are more routinely briefed on things. Connor, can you push it up? I think there might be a few more. Now I've lost place again. Right, a few of these have been discharged. Oh, that item, head of finance and speak to the head of legal services regarding the role of officers and outside bodies, that was done ages ago. Actuaries' roles in respect of pensions, that's been done. That's marked.
Chair, could I come in there,
Yes,
please?
of course you can.
because of the discount rate change that's taken place, Jane, is there any scope for going back to the actuaries and asking positively for a reduction in contribution for the forthcoming year?
The actuarial review is done on a 3-year basis. And it is dictated by that 3-year basis. So the actuary would have done that piece of work. It's a big piece of work, as you can appreciate. So they will not make changes between those valuations. We are seeing the contribution rate reduce over a 3-year period based on the last review. But we won't be able to make any further changes until that next review is done.
So that's clarified. It's a closed book for another 2 years now. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and moving on. Thank you, John. Thank you. GCRE, I've reminded colleagues that we are due some updates on that. It's now a year since we had a presentation on GCRE, and I think we need another update presentation, and the issues that Gareth has raised around broader corporate governance also need to be moved forward. I do appreciate that that's probably fallen between the stools with Nigel moving on, but we need to not
Thanks for resurrecting that. And I've offered to officers to discuss where I come from ahead of
Yes.
meeting, so we get the best value.
Yeah, because I think the last meeting we had was with Nigel in a car and it didn't really work. Moving on, I think my eyes are just about, my eyes are struggling with this. That we also, Jane, you also already discharged the one about insurance arrangements for colleagues. Then there's a couple that have been discharged. Review the debt policy, add to the programme of work, please, Connor, make sure that that's in there. Heads of service, seek assurance, broad awareness guidance. Yeah, I think we did that, didn't we? That's been done. Broad risk assessment. Ian, the swap to provide an update on fraud risk assessment for Powys, has that been done or is that on the? Right, okay, so that's been done. Okay. That's been done, the initial working group meetings. Right, deep dives, okay. Right, okay, I'm going to close that. I know, I do appreciate colleagues that was a bit tedious, but I think it really underscores the breadth and the depth of the work that the committee is doing, but it also underscores the need to, I think, be a bit more agile and a bit sharper about setting deadlines for actions and ensuring that actions are discharged in a timely fashion if we could really work together to attend to that. Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I agree with the comments. I just one little comment I wouldn't mind adding is I don't know if it could be possible to add a bit more description around the progress in the far right hand column, and it's especially when I see things like email sent December 2022.
No, I agree.
What happened? What's following up?
I agree, Pete. Connor, we could maybe look at the format of that, even putting it in landscape with a kind of status. And the name the responsible officer, put a deadline and a bit of a status report would be helpful. Councillor David, I can see you would like to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just with reference to GCRE, I sit on the GCRE Communities Committee on behalf of the leader because it's actually the project's been developed in my ward. Just to say that my understanding is that the authority isn't holding any money now with regard to the GCRE project. It's basically now a case of planning applications, planning updates, etc., etc. As far as the project itself is concerned, they're obviously seeking external funding, that they've had government funding, etc., etc. It's now a case of going out to different bodies in an attempt to secure external capital for the project, which obviously is proving very, very difficult in the current environment. But that's a brief update. I think there might be some changes to the actual design of the project, but that's at a high level. That's where it is at the moment.
Thank you very much, Councillor David. That's very, very much appreciated. I think it would be helpful still for us to have a sort of workshop member development session with the chief executive chap that we met last year, and perhaps to explore some other issues going forward. But thanks very much in the meantime for your update. I'll move us on.
Chair, just before we leave.
Sorry, Gareth.
No, just before we leave the work programme, and there's a certain amount of rejigging going on it. Is this something that can be done? Because I know this group has to submit an annual report. Is it? Can we make it more user friendly to get out the headlines of what we've achieved?
Definitely. Connor, can you make a note of that?
Because it's chronological, and you don't get to be able to weigh up what we've done and the importance of some things.
Yeah, that's very true. No, thanks for that, Gareth. And let's.
I haven't got the answer for it.
Thank you. Yeah, populate self-assessment as we go along and do an annual report. Absolutely, Gareth. Thank you for that. Audit Wales colleagues, I'm going to move us to agenda item 4, which is your Q2 work programme update.
Thank you. For that morning. So in front of you in your agenda pack, you have the Audit Wales work programme timetable update up to the 30th of September. But where I can provide further updates, I will do that. I'll take you through the performance audit work, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Emma to give you an update on the financial audit work. So in terms of 21-22 performance audit work, that's mostly completed now. The one I'd like to draw your attention to is the Springing Forward Asset Management Report. So that's going to be on the agenda later on this morning, so you'll have an opportunity to hear more about that later on. But as you can see from the updates, the other work has been completed and reports have been published. For 22-23, similar situation, we're progressing through with the work there. There's some of the thematic work on performance information report and the digital review. So the performance information work, the report, the draft report has been issued. So we're working through the clearance process on that. And I believe the digital review, that should be coming to you early in the new year. So that the report's been finalised, I believe, by now. And then moving on to 23-24, which is the current audit year, progressing through with that, and there's a lot of scoping in terms of future thematic work as well and happening, and we're progressing with the assurance and risk assessment that we do annually. So in a way, we're quite we're progressing well with the audit programme in terms of performance audits. Further down the update, you'll have statuses of the local government and national studies work, and there's also an input from Estyn and Chem Inspectorate Wales, CIW, where they are with their work programmes as well. And further down, you'll have a comprehensive list of the national reports and other outputs that we published up to September as well, so you can link through to those to our website. So that's a quick run through of the performance audit work and other teams as well. Emma, would you like to give a quick summary of the financial audit work?
Yeah, sure. Diolch, Bethan. Just to let you know, obviously the financial audit work, you'll see we provided the progress as of September, but obviously those deadlines, we have actually met the deadlines, because agenda item 5 and 6 are the statement of accounts and the pension fund, which covers off the first 2 items. And then in terms of our grants work, we're just continuing to do that alongside the other work, and we'll look to achieve the deadlines as per prescribed within the grants terms and conditions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, both. Derwin, do you want to add anything, or you okay? Any questions or comments from committee members? I had a couple of questions, really just curiosity things from me. On page 15 of 18 of your report, it says the senior public service to be confirmed, scoping early 2024. What's that about?
That is a good question. I'm not sure of the details of that, but what I can do, I can go back and
It would
provide
be
an
helpful to
answer.
know, 'cause, you know, is it some sort of cross-cutting, you know, assessment of the public service in Wales, or, you know, and then the other one that obviously caught my eye was on the page 16, audit committees, what does good look like? R&D work to understand the broad audit committee landscape across all sectors in Wales, outputs to support a good practice exchange event. R&D work in December 2023, good practice event, spring 2024. Again, it was really, is there anything you could tell the committee about that? And will committees and membership be engaged in the process?
I'll double check if, you know, in terms of the engagement, what that involves, but the R&D team is the research and development team. So they're working on looking at how audit committees operate, what good looks like, any good practice that they've picked up across different audit committees, and the good practice events. So instead of having a traditional report output, probably there'll be more of an event, and they'll be inviting colleagues as well to participate in that. But I'll get more detailed information over to you, Chair, and as well for the one on page 15, which is the senior public service. But again, that's scoping in the early in 2024. So it will be in its infancy, but I'll get details about what that is likely to entail for you.
Thank you very much, Beth. In fact, thanks very much. Are there any other points for Audit Wales on their programme of work? If not, I'll move us on to the corporate items under agenda item 5, 6 and 7. No, okay.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the corporate items. Item 5, the statement of accounts. 6, the pension fund accounts. I'll ask Dan to come in and give us a short presentation on the accounts, and then I will ask Audit Wales colleagues for their comments on the ISA 260, and then we will have a discussion, and the committee will consider whether it is content to approve the accounts and agree for the section 151 officer and myself to formally sign to that effect. So I'll ask Jane, do you want to say anything, or will I move straight to Dan?
I think move straight to Dan.
Dan, all yours. If you could give us a short introduction, please.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Committee are asked today to consider and approve the 22-23 statement of accounts, and also on agenda item 6, the pension fund accounts. Once approved, the chair and the section 151 officer will sign the accounts, and they'll also need to sign the letter of representation, where we are basically, which contains confirmations we are required to provide Audit Wales under auditing standards and the statement of responsibilities within the section of the account. I've got a short slideshow. If I can just share that. Hopefully you can see that on your screens now. It's just, is it the slideshow you can see, or the minutes?
Yes, Dan, you're okay. Go. You're okay.
Right, okay. Yes, so the statutory deadlines for the accounts are the drafts should be provided by the 31st of May. That's signed by the Section 151 officer and then published by the 31st of July. Relaxations over the last couple of years as a result of COVID and last year around infrastructure assets pushed these deadlines back. There's been a bit of a catch up, I suppose, in all parties around this. So Welsh Government have revised deadlines as long as you follow the instructions around publishing why you haven't made these deadlines on your website. And that's what we've done at each of those dates. As far as the accounts go this year, the draft accounts were signed on the 30th of June. There was then a public inspection from the 27th of September to the 25th of October. It was agreed then that the certification of the accounts by Audit Wales would be done by November, and that was predicated on us providing the accounts, the draft accounts, at the 30th of June. And then there is a requirement then to publish by the end of December. We've met with the Governance and Audit Committee for 2 seminars, one back in July around the draft accounts, looking at movements on the year and just giving information on those accounts. And then on Wednesday, we met to discuss changes. It was felt at that meeting it would be quite a good just to run through some of the movements in the year and just highlight them as part of this presentation. So just briefly, on the balance sheet, we'll see net assets and reserves have increased by 309 million from the previous year. The main driver of this was the reduction in the liability to the defined pension benefit. And the main driver of that was the discount rate of 2%. And those items can be found in note 38. Property, plant and equipment, always quite a big movement in this area. That can be seen in note 12. And the areas are itemised in that note. Debtors and creditors, 16 and 18. These balances have decreased. There's a lot of individual grant funding in areas around COVID and cost of living in 21-22, which shows in the debtors and creditors balances in the previous year. Short-term investments decreased by 15.6 million. That was a result of us repaying the repayable loan to GCRE, to Welsh Government regarding GCRE, and that can be seen in note 15. Long-term borrowing decreased due to early redemption of some LOBO loans totaling 17 million. Again, that can be seen in note 15. As far as the reserve movements go, 302 of this 309 million movement is attributable unusable reserves. Again, we've got the 261 million relating to the pension fund reserve due to mainly the discount rate. We've got 23 million increase in the revaluation reserve and a 20 million increase in the capital adjustment account. Onto the usable reserves, we have a 7 million increase across those. The main movement is 3 million going into the 4 million pound increase in specific reserves relating to the funding of the pay award for this year. There's also a 3 million pound capital reserves increase. The makeup of the specific reserve, the 4 million, can be seen at the bottom of the expenditure and funding analysis. And so you can see how that is made up through each of the service areas. Probably worth pointing out at this moment that the pack that was sent out for the statement of accounts has an adjustment that was being made since that pack was sent out. I think a revised pack was sent last night, and it is around this area. So on page 25 of the accounts and page 99 of the public pack, the balances at the bottom of the expenditure and funding analysis the final 3 columns, the opening balance for the specific reserves, including the HRA reserve and general fund, should be bracketed, and they're not. So a revised version has been sent out. It's also worth noting that note 22, there's a reconciliation between the narrative report that is sent to Cabinet in June is reconciled to the provision of services, which can be seen in the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. So that's a quick summary of the main movements in the accounts on the main statements. I was now going to go on to the purpose of today, really, and looking at the report that Audit have provided and the approval of the accounts. So within their report, Audit are looking to issue an unqualified opinion. Within the report, they list in Appendix 3 amendments they've asked us to make to the accounts or misstatements, and we've, for the statement of accounts, we have amended them all. So there's no uncorrected misstatements. As I say, they're all listed in Appendix 3. And I was just going to quickly go through those adjustments. The first one is 12.7 million pound adjustment to indices applied to council dwellings, reflecting inflationary costs. We knew this adjustment was coming. It wasn't included in the draft accounts as we didn't have the indices at that time from the valuers. There's also a 3.8 million capital commitments adjustment. We'd included the capital commitment within on the ledger, but what had been taken into account was the goods received in year. So we've had to make a reduction in the balance that was shown in the draft accounts. Expenditure, there was one item relating to Llanfachlin Leisure Centre, which we had recorded as non-enhancing, and it should have been enhancing regarding the 3G pitch there, which was a £1 million adjustment. I'll also highlight that within Appendix 4 of the audit report, it does mention as a recommendation, we had a similar issue to this last year, and unfortunately this has been picked up again this year, so obviously we'll have to work harder to address that next year. There's also a categorization error where we've had some assets under construction which we needed to amend as they're now usable assets to council dwellings. There's also several of the changes around the notes, some small adjustments to the senior officer emolument note, also disclosures to related parties. We also asked to include a narrative around reinforced or declaved aerated concrete or RAC, which we're aware we haven't analysed all properties in our portfolio as yet. So there's a note on them that some small roofs properties are still to be looked at, although we consider the risk to be low on those. There was a disclosure note within the IAS 19 where we were required to change a date as well. So that concludes the my section of the report. So I don't know if I'd like to pass to Audit Wales, or unless there's any questions.
Dan, thank you very much. I'm going to ask Jane to come in, then I'll ask Audit Wales colleagues to talk to their assessment, the ISA 260, and then I'll open for questions from members. Jane and then colleagues.
Only a brief comment from myself. I think it's worth noting when you look at the main statements within the accounts, and from a public perception, it's very often things like reserves that they focus on. We are entering quite a challenging period in terms of public sector finances. And one thing that we've really focused on, and any opportunity we have to strengthen our own financial resilience, is something that we do look at. And you'll note that we have increased our reserves at the end of last year. Our reserves are not significant. We are relatively low in terms of those reserves when you compare ourselves with other authorities across Wales. What we did do this year, and Dan did refer to a couple of these elements, with the specific challenge around pay awards and the increases in line with where we are across inflation. Those nationally agreed pay awards did put a pressure on our accounts for the current financial year. So we did take the opportunity at the end of last year to put some aside to help us meet those pressures in this year, and that has really stood us in good stead and will do going forward. The other element around the capital receipts and any underspends that we've seen on capital, again, we've ring-fenced that to support our capital programme in the future. That is quite significant as well because of the cost of borrowing and the impact that that has on our revenue account. So I just wanted to draw people's attention to a couple of items there. You know, we are very, very much focused on financial resilience as we move into what's going to be a very challenging period.
Thanks very much, Jane. That is definitely a point worth making. I'll hand over to Audit Wales colleagues. Derwin, are you taking this item or are you? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take this one, Chair. Audit that. To be fair, I think Dan's done a very good job of summarising where we are with the audit. The report that is in your packs this morning is a summary of our main findings from the last few weeks of work as we've audited your draft accounts. I suppose one thing I should touch upon is the reminder to the committee that auditors can never give absolute assurance as to the accuracy of your accounts. In line with the industry standard, we use the concept of materiality. And from memory, I think we had a conversation about that in the last meeting. The calculation for this year is around £5.5 million. The other thing I wanted to touch on is in paragraph 6 of our report, we say that there are a couple of matters outstanding as we drafted the report and submitted it for the papers. I'm pleased to say that those matters have now been concluded and no additional items of concern were identified. So as Dan says, we propose to give an unqualified opinion on your accounts. That is, in our opinion, they do show a true and fair view of the council's transactions for the year and of your balances and liabilities at the year end. I would go further and say that they are a good set of accounts, which is great to see, and that once again the cooperation we've received from the council has been excellent. So a big thank you to Jane, to Dan, to James and the whole team for the way in which they've supported us with the audit over the last few weeks. Dan has covered the misstatements that we've identified. As he said, they're in Appendix 3, and the one recommendation we are making around just tightening up some of those procedures around capital expenditure and the identification of non-enhancing expenditure. But other than that, once we receive the letter of representation, the Auditor General is due to sign next Tuesday afternoon. And I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Derwin, and thank you for your comments. I particularly welcome the and go further good set of accounts because it's not every public sector audit committee that hears those words, and so I'll underscore your thanks to Dan and Jane and the team for all of the work that goes into this. But I will now move to the committee and seek any questions or comments from colleagues, and I can see John's little light has come on. So I'll invite John to the floor.
Talk H lamp, rather. Jane, I was looking at the trends in the current assets and current liabilities and wondering whether they're slightly adverse in terms of the ratio of one to the other. Have you any comment you'd like to make about our liquidity?
Thank you, Chair. James is here as a Treasury Manager, so I may ask him to come in after I've said just a little, but the committee will recall that we're currently in an under-borrowed position. So that does mean we've got access to funds should we need to draw on them quite readily. So that's something that obviously helps us in terms of that liquidity, but generally we're reasonably okay. We have developed actually, not that we've shared it with committee, but as part of our financial resilience, we've looked at liquidity and done some ratios around that to show where we are against some of those standard ratios. So I'm happy that we can potentially share that with the committee. I can do that outside of the meeting.
Thank you. That'd be very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think in terms of the current ratio, we are, as you noted, slightly under there because of where our liabilities stand to our assets. But generally, and this is where it's key to monitor council tax collection rates and really have a close eye on that cash flow, which of course we do. But no, I'm reasonably comfortable with where we are. So no issues as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if James wants to add anything further.
I'll just add that we've been taking out quite significant amounts of short-term borrowing while the rates are high. So that will be impacting our current liabilities, because a lot of our borrowing we've been taking out for 1 year rather than the 40, 30, 40, 50 that we would normally. So that borrowing is hindering or increasing our current liabilities figure, and hence the sort of the current ratio or quick ratio as you normally apply it to our accounts. As rates fall, we'll expect to see some of that drop out and move into, we'll refinance that with longer term borrowing, which will hit into long-term liabilities rather than the currents, which will help our ratio there.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Jane. John, I trust that satisfies you. Thank you. I can see Councillor William on screen would like to come in. Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair, and preface my my couple of questions by congratulating Jane, Dan, and the James and the wider team for securing this unqualified opinion, and also the remarks of Audit Wales, which is an organisation that doesn't chuck around compliments frivolously. I think that's something that we need to recognise, and the work that's gone into to this whole annual exercise. So well done on that. My particular question relates to my screen has gone. Oh, there we go. It's page 10 of the report. It relates to the completion of a very welcome completion of 68 new dwellings, with further dwellings coming up the track. And I wanted to ask, in terms of the medium-term financial planning for capital, to what extent do we have to make provision for the current lack of clarity around the ability to go forward in the next year or two with this very important area of development, because of the issue around the phosphates directives and so on, which is causing significant problems in certain areas of the county council HRA area, not just but mainly in the Brecon Beacons National Park, but also to an extent in the Powys County Council planning area. And also, is there provision for the risk of loss of social housing grant from Welsh Government, which is often linked to delivery? And this is an area that comes up frequently for myself and for other colleagues. It's really good to see what has been achieved, but I think we all realise the lead-in time to these matters is often several years, and therefore, in order to maintain that progress, which is such a vital area, how are we doing in terms of insulating ourselves against that current problem, which clearly is an urgent need of resolution? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor William. I'll ask Jane to address these questions, please.
Yes, thank you. it may be beneficial for one of our housing team to come and give you a bit more detail, but I can cover off many of those points from a financial perspective. We have been impacted in terms of our housing development programmes because of the phosphates issue and not being able to develop some sites. However, the team are looking to purchase properties where they can, particularly those that fall within our current housing estate. So if properties become vacant and put on the market, then we look to see whether we can purchase those units. They are subject to a business case, as you would expect with any purchase that we make. And as part of that business case, we do consider the level of housing support grants that would be available to support some of those purchases. I think it's fair to say, obviously, in terms of the housing stock, it's ring fenced within the HRA. So it doesn't necessarily impact on the council's position, but obviously the HRA is a considerable item for us to keep that eye on, and obviously that we do. There are a number of obligations on the HRA around the, and I can, WHQS, I remember the acronym now, as we keep those properties up to a certain standard, and that in itself does put a level of financial pressure on the housing revenue account. I think we are minded from a Wales perspective, actually, in terms of the increase in borrowing costs, but also the increase in construction costs and work around that WHQS. I think it is very much seen that potentially over the future years, we may not be able to do as much as we would have hoped because of that financial pressure. But all of that is factored into our business plan for the HRA, and obviously it's something that we consider as we develop that and update it on an annual basis. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Jane. That's very helpful. Coming from a finance specialist, you obviously are well across the key issues. I personally very strongly welcome the decision to go for recovering properties that have been previously lost to the housing stock through sale and so on. And I think that is very helpful. One appeal that I would make, or a question that I would ask, is: are we keeping our colleagues in the planning function, both in-house in our own authority and in within the Brecon Beacons National Park, aware of the fragility of the capital situation, so that without in any way undermining the planning process, which obviously has got to be dealt with separately and appropriately, that they are aware of the wider context of the work that they're doing on our behalf as well. Because I think it's really important that they don't operate in isolation, and that deliverability, that an eye is kept on deliverability and on the wider challenges that we all face. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. The senior leadership team collectively have a focus on all financial matters, and that routine meeting of that group ensures that everybody is kept abreast of the issues and can respond appropriately.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor William. Thank you, Jane. Are there any further questions on the 2022-2023 statement of accounts? Gareth.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think the plaudits are very well recognised, Chair, to get these accounts in this position so promptly and effectively. One thing that I've been looking through the report that goes with the accounts, because at the end of the day, the accounts is telling you, has the money been spent properly? But performance and the link of the bangs for bucks, for want of a better term, of spending that money. What I've not quite seen is a direct correlation, both after the event and in the narrative. It gives some high level performance against the corporate plan objectives, but doesn't go down to much granularity, when in fact the council will be embarking on the start of this process as business planning. So business planning should relate to the outputs that you achieve for the budget that you're given, because this Councillor David has reminded us there's going to be some very difficult choices made next year. So what the performance that you believe that you can get for that. So what to look at it in the round, what I'd like to see through this committee is through the business planning process, what do you expect for your money and how it's allocated? And then we come around to the accounts after that money's been spent to look back and look at any variance in that performance and any lessons to be learned. And I don't see an explicit linkage in the council between this, around this circular process.
No, Gareth, I would agree with that analysis. Yeah, Jane?
I think, yes, it's fundamental, isn't it, to make sure that you understand, one, what we set out to achieve at the outset and what that was likely to cost us against how we performed. And that's a lot wider than what you see in a statement of accounts and even in the quarterly monitoring reports, where we're looking at whether we're on budget, but it doesn't really tell us whether we achieve those objectives. So the size of the organisation makes it very difficult to bring all of that together in one place. But we do, and this is something we've been looking to improve quite readily across the organisation. It is much more data around that performance linked with the finances of the authority. And I think we're getting to a better place with that. But we aren't where we need to be yet by any means. So I think we acknowledge that. And this is where the scrutiny process at an individual committee level, you know, not just at audit committee, but in those individual committees, that scrutiny around finance and performance is where those more in-depth reviews should sit. And that has to be supported by that robust information. So you're absolutely right. It is part of that whole picture. And we are working to get to that, but we're not exactly where we need to be yet.
Thanks for that. If we could add that to our work programme and put a target date, which may be, because it would be good to get in on the ground for the cycle as part of the business planning process.
No, I agree with you, Gareth, because it wouldn't be helpful for us to see the narrative at the same point next year and make exactly the same comments. Because, you know, obviously it's too late to change anything for this particular set of accounts. However, I would agree that your point is well made. Therefore, early engagement, so that we can both seek assurance and be supportive. Being supportive being really important at an earlier stage in the process to contribute to make a better product ultimately, or to contribute to a better product. Of course you can, Jane.
Just to add to that, and I think that work is fundamental to sustainable powers. So as we change and look at our plans and look at the resources we have and what we can deliver, that is absolutely key to that. And that's why you should expect to see much more of that as we move through that process.
Good. But on a positive side, we would not be looking to micromanage. We'd be looking at that high level performance, maybe, which goes to the senior leadership team. And then we could focus on variances, Chair.
Absolutely, Gareth, because this particular committee's role is not to manage, it is to have governance oversight and to provide assurance, to seek and to provide assurance. And we're very mindful of our role, but we can contribute and are willing to support this process. Councillor Chris, and this will be the final question on the statutory accounts. Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and well done to everyone. I think it's a real achievement getting an unqualified audit and that on there. Dan, in your presentation, and I seek clarification, you put the timetable up of when the accounts needed to be completed, and I think then you put September to October was a period of where there was some form of engagement with the public to view the accounts. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. Every year we need to make the accounts available for a 4-week period for members of the public to come in and inspect them if they so wish. And then the auditor makes themselves available at a later date, usually the day after, or certainly within that week. If there are any follow-up questions, we usually advertise that we're issuing that public inspection, and we got 2 weeks So it should be advertised 2 weeks before the public inspection starts. And it just so happened this year that no one came in to question the accounts.
Okay, so you've answered my question. I wanted to see what engagement we were having from the public. And you mentioned that there was no engagement this time, or no one asked any questions. In previous years, have we had engagement in that process? And are we an outlier by not having any engagement from the public? Because just building on what Councillor Powell has mentioned about some of the challenges that are going to be ahead, and what Gareth was saying regarding, you know, the challenges coming forward through, you know, some of the rising costs that are still working through, and the pressures on budgets, on the public ownership of some of this agenda is really important. So it's how do we engage them in this process, and what role does this committee have in trying to do that, to just make our accounts more transparent and open as possible?
Yeah, previous years we have had people in, the agendas or the questions that they ask sometimes aren't specifically related to accounts, and they're probably narrow scope, but they're few and far between people coming in. I know it was raised at a practitioners group, and there was a council, they say that someone comes in every year, they basically give them a room, give them the accounts, and they're providing them with information throughout the period they're in, but generally I don't think there is that much engagement, and certainly from the Powys perspective that is the case.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks very much, and thanks very much for your question, Councillor Chris. It is pertinent to the wider issue of public engagement with this committee and its business, and indeed the whole of the authority's business. I'm going to remind the committee of the recommendation in the covering paper. It's recommended that the committee considers and approves the 2022-23 Statement of Accounts and Letter of Representation, which can be formally signed by the Chair of the committee and the Section 151 officer. The Statement of Accounts be published as soon as possible, but certainly by the 31st of December 2023. Is the committee content to approve that recommendation? John has moved, and Gareth has seconded. Thank you very much, colleagues. Dan, can I move you? Oh, sorry, I've just committed a faux pas, and I should be inviting everyone to vote and raise a hand, which Councillor William had done, and I hadn't. Yeah. Okay. The accounts are absolutely, Jane, and I am completely happy for people to pull me up where I get the protocols a bit wrong. So I'm very grateful for that. Moving us on to agenda item 6, Dan, could you introduce the pension fund accounts for 2022-23, and following your introduction, I'll ask Derwin to provide Audit Wales's commentary on these accounts. Dan.
Apologies, I want to share the screen again and put myself on mute. Yes, same as the Statement of Accounts, we're looking for approval of the Letter of Representation and the accounts. The timelines for the pension fund accounts, they're included in a pension fund report, which our Pension and Investment Committee will approve at a later date, later this month in fact, and they need to be published by the 1st of December. A quick run through of the accounts. As per normal, the main change in value is the change in market value of the investments, and that can be seen on the pension fund account, and that has decreased this year by 38 million. Within the year, there's several movements in assets as the asset allocation changes. So when you're looking at things like management fees, they can change depending on what type of assets you've got. So that this can often be big movements in fees to particular different investments, but it could be just the state or the amounts under management we've got with those asset classes. Contributions, the main contributor to the scheme is the Powys County Council, but we do get outside bodies sending in returns and income on a monthly basis. The payments are calculated by the Pensions Administration Department within Powys CC. Pension Investment Committee meet at least quarterly, and they will review and receive valuations of the fund as part of those quarterly meetings. And the Pensions Investment Committee received their draft pension annual fund report on the 6th of October. So they will have considered the report as well, which includes the accounts. But obviously it's this committee that approves the accounts. Going to the ISA 260. This year, there's one, well, I suppose the first thing is the materiality level will be 7.8 million. Audit are intending to issue an unqualified opinion, but there is one uncorrected misstatement within the accounts. You can see the amount, the 1.4 million is below the materiality level, but above trivial, so it needs to be reported by Audit Wales. We've decided we are not adjusting this misstatement due to the fact that the valuation we had at the 30th of June was below this level. Obviously, we've had something in since, but private equity valuations tend to be provided late. And I've provided the note which we include in the accounts around the critical judgments in applying accounting policies, which states the subjective nature of the fair value of private equity investments. So obviously, if it was above the materiality level, we would have no problem with adjusting it. But because it is below that, we've decided we will not adjust it. Adjustments would flow through the accounts as well, which would take considerable time. But obviously, if it was above material, we would adjust. There were misstatements, or well, I say a lot of them were presentational and narrative, minor amendments, and then there were also AVC valuations, which we didn't have from the AVC providers at the time of the 30th of June. So they were to be confirmed within the draft accounts. But those have since been adjusted now in the report to be signed. Don't know if there's any questions at this point, or you're happy I pass the mantle back to Audit Wales.
Thanks very much, Dan. Chris, Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Chair. It's just in relation to the 1.4 that you mentioned, which had been flagged up. Understand the point that it's not, we're not going to correct it, but by them flagging it, isn't that something that we should address on there, or is this more of a global issue that every authority would be affected by this point? Because sometimes by ignoring these points can cause more challenges going forward.
Thanks very much, Chris. Dan, I'm gonna ask you to hold fire on answering and bring in Audit Wales colleagues to talk to the ISA 260 and ask them. In so doing, we'll wrap up Councillor Chris's question in their remarks, and if there's anything further that you can add following that, Dan, I'll bring you back in. But thank you for the question, Councillor Chris. Derwin?
Thank you, Chair. I'll ask Emma to present this one for us.
Okay, thank you very much, Emma.
Thanks, Chair. As you'll see in the ISA 260 report, just as Dan has so aptly said within his report, the pension fund materiality is 7.8 million. We commented obviously at point 6, there was a bit less work that we had left to do when we presented this report to you, to say that we had to do a review. We've now completed our review of the account, so the work that we need to do is all complete, so that's good. As we've mentioned, obviously there's the uncorrected misstatement, and I think as Dan said really within his report, what we do is we highlight things to audit committee where they're above trivial level, so that means that we need to report them, and then obviously this is well below materiality with it being 1.463 million. So to be honest, we're of the opinion that it needs to be brought to your attention, but if you were reading the accounts, you wouldn't get a untrue view, if you like, of the accounts because of the value that's contained within. So therefore, although the council hasn't made that change, it wouldn't affect someone's opinion if they were to be reading the accounts, given that it's, as I say, £6 million less than materiality. But obviously it needs to be brought to your attention to confirm that you're content that it hasn't been changed. In terms of corrected misstatements, there was just the 2 contained within the appendix. One of them was as a result of information being received after the draft account had been prepared by Dan and the team, and that was a TBC within the accounts and now has been updated, and then the others were just minor amendments. So that was all really in terms of the amendments and the uncorrected misstatements that have been made. But a bit like Derwin has said before, I think it's important to recognise, these are a good set of accounts. The team has worked well with us, so we'd like to thank Dan, Jane, and also Chris, who's helped out with the pension fund. And overall, really, it is a set of accounts that the council should be quite proud of. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you very much, Emma, and thank you for your positive comments about the team and the work and the quality of the accounts as well. And I'll ask Jane to come in, please.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to be getting the comments that we're getting, and I will make sure I pass a lot of that on to the team, because they have worked really hard, and we've seen a number of improvements over a number of years on our accounts, and I think that is really bearing fruit now. So thank you for those comments. Just one thing on the uncorrected misstatement. I think it's important to reflect on what the auditors have said, but obviously we look at any misstatements and consider them carefully. You'll appreciate when you're estimating a value for a figure as large as we're looking at in this aspect, that figure will have changed many times since the accounts were actually agreed and finalised. So I think it's important to note that it is at a snapshot in time, and with pension valuations particularly, as long as we're roughly within where we need to be and it is below that materiality rate, then we are totally comfortable with what's reflected in the account, as are Audit Wales. So I am not, not concerned about that at all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jane. I can see that Derwin would like to come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that really and come back to Councillor Chris's question. Yeah, the council put in a reasonable best estimate at the time. It's simply that for the passage of time, that figure was £1.4 million out. That is the world of accounting and audit. I get to sit back after the event and see what the actual figure was, but Jane and the team got to go with best estimates, and that's the way it is. So it's not a cause for concern, and we are quite relaxed about the council not amending the accounts for it.
Thank you very much, Derwin. That's greatly appreciated. Before I move to the recommendation, I would also like to extend my thanks to the Audit Wales team for their professionalism and their engagement with Jane's team, because from all the feedback I get, it's a very constructive and professional relationship, and I think it's important that we thank our auditors as well as thanking our own team. If there are any, Councillor Peake, final question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just like other members, I was very pleased to hear all the comments today. And again, just like to echo what everyone else has said and pass on my thanks and congratulations to Jane, Dan and the rest of the team. There was just a quick observation around the number of new, retirements. There's 156 in the report, and I wondered if that was due to any particular reasons, whether it was age, especially in view of the difficulties we all know we're getting in attracting and keeping members of the workforce.
Jane, could you?
Yeah, I think, you know, it is everybody's choice to retire when they wish to retire. I think actually after COVID, we saw more people considering their lives, their work-life balances, and we did see an increase, particularly at that period. And of course, this year is not long after that as well. So it'll be worth keeping an eye on to see, you know, what does happen over the next few years. But it is a trend that we have seen, and I think it's probably something that's been seen elsewhere as well. People are just, you know, reconsidering in terms of what they want to do and so on. So you do see.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks very much for the question. Thank you. And one to watch, as Jane says. I'm going to move to the recommendation, colleagues, for agenda item 6. So the recommendation is that the committee considers and approves the 2022-23 pension fund accounts and letter of representation, which can then be formally signed by the chair of the committee and the section 151 officer. Do I have someone who will move? John has moved, Councillor William has seconded, and is everyone content to approve the recommendation? Thank you very much. Thank you, and thanks very much to Audit Wales colleagues and Dan and Jane and the wider team. Thanks very much. Moving to agenda item 7, which is the annual governance statement assurance. And I'm going to bring in James to introduce this. James Langridge Thomas will introduce this item, and committee members will recall that we have had, I think this may be our 3rd consideration of the annual governance statement. We have had several very long, detailed discussions on this item, which I sincerely hope officers and cabinet members have found helpful. With that context, I'll pass over to James to introduce the item.
Diolch Chair, Board of Pawb. Thank you all for your time today. So I'm here to present the final version of the annual governance statement on behalf of Catherine James, who's unfortunately not able to attend today. So just first of all, I wanted to extend a thanks to committee members, officers and Audit Wales, as the Chair's just alluded to. It's been a very long process with lots of cooperation and support in finalising the document that's been presented today. I appreciate it. This has been a long process with quite heavy at times, but the significant contributions have been invaluable. Rather than going through the detail contained within the full document within the agenda pack, as the committee has seen this document several times, I'll try and keep it very succinct rather than expanding. So whilst 2022-23 was a challenging year for a range of reasons, we've identified our overall assurance level to be reasonable, meaning that we're able to offer reasonable assurance that the Council's arrangements adequately reflect the principles of good governance as indicated in the SIP for Good Governance framework. Generally, risks are well managed, but some processes could be improved. Considering the specific principles which underpin this process, we believe that we've offered a fair and balanced reflection with a mix of substantial and reasonable assurance levels throughout, with a range of support and evidence to help inform these judgments, and have also identified areas for improvement. to be assured the areas for improvement as it relates to 22-23. They are already in train in terms of the integrated business plan process, as is the wider annual governance statement process for 23-24, as the committee will be aware. So rather than go into any content, as I believe you've seen the contents many times, a comment on the content, assurance levels, etc. The ask of the committee today is to approve the final annual governance statement, which, if in agreement, will then be published as required to the public PCC website and also shared accordingly with a range of stakeholders. And that was it by means of an introduction. So if there were any questions from members, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you. I'll take questions from the chamber and from members online. Are there no questions for James? I'm sure James is really disappointed because we usually do ask a lot of questions of the annual governance statement. If there are no further questions to James, I will remind members of the recommendation. The recommendation is that the committee considers the report presented here and satisfies itself that relevant criteria have been met, and is satisfied that the AGS provides an accurate account of processes, systems and records that the council had in place in 2022-23 and demonstrates the effectiveness of its governance arrangements, and that the committee approve the annual governance statement for 2022-23. And just reminding colleagues and any members of the public who are with us today that the committee has gone through in some detail the relevant criteria to provide assurance to itself and colleagues on previous occasions. Do I have anyone who will propose the motion? John? Yep. Seconder, please. Councillor Ange, and are all members content to approve the annual governance statement? Approved. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to Kath and James for all their hard work on the governance statement. I will move us on to agenda item 8, Treasury Management, and James Chappell is going to lead on this item. And we have Q1 and Q2 updates before us, but I'm going to ask James to focus in on Q2, please. James.
Yeah, good morning, members. I was going to take the reports together as one, really, because most things you'll see Q2 is most up to date. So as you can see, we've got Q1 and Q2 there, as we're required to do under the SIPFA guidelines. So investments, we've had interest received up from £160,000 in Q1 to over £500,000 in Q2. This is just us holding our surplus cash for cash flow purposes in deposits account, although we have been doing some short-term lending to other local authorities. The capital programme, that has increased from £93 million in Q1 to £96 million Q2. This increase has been mostly due to extra grants being awarded in year. However, despite the increase, there's been a drop in the borrowing, so that's fallen from 48%, 48 million, to just over 42% in Q2. And we expect that borrowing level to drop a bit more towards the end of the year as when schemes get reprofiled. And as you see, the CFR projections have fallen as well, in line with those reduced borrowing requirements. Onto borrowing. So PWLB rates remain higher than they are at the beginning of the year, or some of the terms have peaked and are slightly lower now than they were at the peak during the year. £5 million worth of borrowing from other local authorities was repaid in Q1. A further £8.5 million was repaid in Q2. Together with the remaining 17.4 million we were holding for the Global Centre for Rail Excellence scheme, GCRE scheme, back to Welsh Government. A further £25 million borrowing is due to be repaid in Q3. And to cover this, 20 million of borrowing was arranged from other local authorities. 5 million of that received in September and 15 million was planned to be received in October. The financing cost to net revenue stream, these estimates are showing an improved position this year, but there is still a peak predicted in next year as the borrowing rates remain high as we continue to do short-term borrowing, trying not to lock the council into too much higher rate, and hence the lower estimate then in 25-26. And Link have also provided their forecasts in the report. Sundry debt, there was an increase in Q1 up to 17 million, and then that dropped back to just under 15 million in Q2. There's various tables in the report that show the breakdown by service, and there's a spark line in the summary tables that show the trend over the last year or so. At the end of Q2, council tax collection is very slightly down on previous year, at the same point previous year, but NNDR is just under 4% up on the same point last year. As usual, Link have provided an economics update for each quarter, and those are in the appendix to the report. And we've also provided VAT KPIs. So in Q1, £14,000 VAT had been recharged to services that hadn't been claimed correctly. This has increased to just under 70,000 in Q2, although there is a potential to recover £63,000 of that should the correct documents be obtained. There's a breakdown charges per service and type also included in the report. That was my very quick walkthrough of them both. So I'll hand back to the chair.
Thanks very much, James. I'll open it up for questions from the chamber and from members online. John has a question for you, James.
Yes, I'm looking at the table on page 421 of the sundry debts and sundry debts by service. The total aged debt is now some £15 million. And the trend also, looking at the little squiggles on the right, in the right-hand column, the trend appears in general to be upwards. What are we doing about it?
Good question, John. And we are doing something about it.
I thought you would be.
So members will recall that I did state some time ago that in terms of adult social services and the level of debt that we see against that particular service, Cabinet have asked for a deep dive around that. So that report is being considered by the management team first on Monday, and then it will go to Cabinet on Tuesday. And I'm sure once Cabinet have seen that, then they would be happy for this committee to also consider that report. We have strengthened our recovery team. We are also raising the issue more widely across the senior leadership team, because every service has some responsibility in terms of managing debt and so forth. So we have put some additional officers into the team, albeit we'll see how long we need to have that additional resource there. And they are very much doing a bit more of a focus around that debt recovery piece. So something we're actively monitoring. You will see that in terms of this quarter, that longer term debt did come down. You do see peaks and troughs around this, and particularly when some of the bigger bills or numbers of bills are issued at certain points in the year. But obviously we're keeping a very careful eye on this, and we hope to see the benefit of that additional resource being pumped in as well.
Have we provisioned any write-offs?
We do.
I know you do regularly,
routinely, yes.
But I mean, in terms of this, is there something coming forward towards the end of the year which is going to significantly change it in terms of write-offs?
Not that I'm anticipating at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Jane. I am confident that I can speak on behalf of the committee to say that we would welcome that paper or that report in due course once the Cabinet has considered it. I'm quite sure the committee would appreciate seeing that. Are there any further questions on James's treasury management, Gareth?
Yeah, in paragraph 344, it says that 2/3 of the over 3 months debt is adult social care debt. And I remember in a previous report, we had the comfort that this was covered by charges on people's property that was realisable after their days, but it takes some time for that process to go through. But it isn't included on those charges aren't included on the balance sheet. But it would give some cover to know that these debts will eventually be covered and not written off. It's just a matter of time. So there's pretty minimal risk. The only risk is the time it takes to realise it. Can there be some sort of acknowledgement of that?
I think that was something that the audit team have picked up with us in the past. It's something we are considering now as we're drawing together next year's budget plan. It's a careful balance, because of the delay in getting those payments through. We wouldn't necessarily want to recognise a substantial amount of income in our accounts where we know we're not going to get it for a while. So we're thinking that through in terms of how we may potentially show it on the balance sheet. Yeah. We do have a record of it, but as you rightly say, it's held outside of the accounts at the moment, but we are considering it at the moment.
Good.
Thanks both, and I can see that James wants to come back in on the back of that point as well. James?
Yeah, just to note, we had a significant payment in last week, which was, settling some of these fees from years once people's estates were tidied up. So it does happen. It just takes a significant amount of time for it to happen.
Thanks, James. Thanks for that assurance. Yeah, thank you very much. Are there any final questions on the Treasury Management?
Just this question of purchase cards.
Yes.
I think then, if I may, we repeatedly ask about this. I know you've repeatedly told us you've stomped your foot, but there's still quite a significant number of transgressions. Is there anything more we can do?
We have, as part of the whole budget management process and financial management more generally, we've had quite a focus over the last couple of months with heads of service around their responsibilities in terms of monitoring every item of spend, every pound of spend. We absolutely have that confidence that it is valid. And as part of that, we've developed some reports that will go to heads of service for them to see the actual level of transactions and what is being purchased in more detail. That was available before, but I think it was within a suite of reports. So we've sort of pulled that out to enable people to do that. And there has been quite a lot of focus from each head of service, particularly from a school's perspective as well. And we're highlighting that with governing bodies as well. So you see when you look at the error rates and so on, our schools are not the best in making sure that they provide some of those invoices and so on. So yeah, we have upped the ante there, and it is some focus that the audit team do when they go in to do an individual school audit as well. So we're trying to approach it in every which way we can, John, to increase the rigour.
Thank you. Thanks very much both. Thank you. And this is simply an update report. We're not required to vote on it. And thank you for your question, John, because it is actually a very helpful segue into agenda item 9. So we can move to agenda item 9, which are our swap internal audit items for this meeting. Councillor Lewington, Pete, do you want to come in?
Sure, Chair. Can I just go back to the previous item in the debt? I was just musing on, so just I guess it may be more for my information actually, is I was trying to just understand how it is the outstanding debt impacts on the precept that we raise. Okay. When it comes in on council tax, because I guess I was just listening to James when he said some of the money we've just got in is from years and years ago, whereas obviously on here it just said over 90 days. So I didn't know how those outstanding amounts and then the releases when we get them in is impacting that precept.
It doesn't really impact the precept specifically. In terms of the level of council tax increase we set, then obviously the whole financial position of the council is a consideration in setting that. We don't adjust the precepts at all in any year. Once they're set, and that's how they would flow through. So debt management is obviously a key concern in terms of financial management, and that tight financial management really does impact on the overall financial position, which in turn sees where we set that council tax level. So it is integrated, but it's not, there isn't a specific link between the two at a level when you're not recovering it. Obviously, in terms of the council tax base, we do put in there an assumed level of collection. So there is that interaction between the two. And our collection rates are relatively good, particularly in terms of being in the top quartile across Wales as well. We are well above the 98%, and that's what we factor into those collection rates. So as long as we're achieving where we expect to be there, and that is something that's audited as well when we set the council tax base. So there is that interaction.
Thanks, Pete. Thank you. I will move us on now to agenda item 9, and in so doing, I will extend my apologies to colleagues who are guests for this item. Rhiannon Evans, the chair of Brecon High, and the head, Richard Jenkins, and their finance lead, Anne-Marie Lloyd, who are very welcome to the meeting. But apologies for running a bit late, because I know you are probably extremely busy with other commitments. And I believe Councillor Gwynfor and Councillor Allard are also joining us, and Councillor Pete, for this particular item. So you are all very welcome. Sorry? Oh, that's why Rhiannon's on her phone, I guess. Right, okay.
Yeah, sorry, they're trying to get in.
Okay. What I'm going to do, Rhiannon, is I'm going to ask Ian to move to introduce his first 2 items, which are themed items. So that will give you a little bit of time to get colleagues in for the particular Brecon High discussions. But for colleagues from Brecon High, just to remind you all that this is a public meeting when you're addressing remarks. But I'll ask Ian to look to his first 2 items and to lead us through the governance and finance thematic reviews, Ian, and then we'll come to, hopefully colleagues will be in by the time we get to the particular Brecon High section. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share my screen with members so that hopefully it will make it a little bit clearer. Sorry, many apologies. Right, members hopefully can see the slides. So what I'm briefly going to do today is talk about 2 pieces of work that we have undertaken during the year. They're on page 431 of the agenda pack, and those 2 pieces of work are around governance and finance in all schools. So just to give a bit of background, we've recently developed a new process that, do I need to take? Bear with me 1 second. There we are. Thank you. So we've developed a new process called the 360 review, and it's based on something called the 3 lines model. So I'll just briefly run through this. But the 3 lines model looks around 3 layers of assurance, and at the top it's a governing body. So those are, those accountable for the delivery of that function, and in the school it will be the governing body. And then it looks at the lines of, they used to be called the lines of defence, but they're called the 3 lines model. And the first line is management, and those are the ones delivering the actual service itself. So that would be the head teacher in the case of a school. The second line would be those experts that support that, and that would be those monitor and challenge. So they could be risk management or they could be performance management. And then finally, the third line is us, an internal audit. We're independent. So I'll move on. In terms of coverage, those are the areas of coverage that we do. And today we're going to consider governance in a clockwise direction all the way around to unofficial funds. So all of those areas will be covered today in the theme review. Generally what we do is we send a number of questionnaires to schools, to the governors, to the second line defence, to the experts, and also to ourselves, and we go in and we bring all that information together and we look for conflicts and we look for non-compliances in there and we put those in our report. But what we've done differently this time, all those schools have been done in silos, independently, one by one, looking at each school at a time. What we've done this time, we've simply taken that and looked at it, instead of on the silo, we've looked at it in a cross-cutting way. So we've taken all of the controls and we're looking at them across all of the schools that we do in the year. And that gives us patterns and trends. So before I just dive into the more detailed finding, I'll just give you a little bit of information and background about the role of the school. Now, a school governor has an important role. There are three core functions. That's planning the strategic direction of the school. That's overseeing the financial performance of the school, that money is well spent, and it's holding the head teacher or the school leadership to account. And in terms of their responsibilities, well, the governing body is responsible for the school. The local authority is responsible for supporting and having an interest in the fact that all schools should be well managed and governed. And then finally, the local authority's defined responsibility is supporting the governing body by providing advice, resources, and importantly, challenge. So I'm going to dig into, or dive into the details of the report now. Before I do that, what does good governance look like? Well, good governance in this case is around having a properly constituted governing body, and that it has due process and meetings for making effective decisions that are recorded. It looks at having plans and policies that are approved, delivered and reviewed. And it's about having a governing body that has the necessary skills and training in place. So I'm just going to now drill into the findings of the review itself. So the first area we looked at, you'll notice there are two sides of this. There's the left-hand side, which looks at the positive assurance around the work we've done. And then there's the right-hand side, which looks at the potential areas of improvement for that subsection. So the first area is around committees and meetings. As you can see, positively, there are business interests that are declared. All subcommittees and subcommittees are in place and mainly meet on a regular basis. However, an area of improvement should be that some committees, I think especially the finance subcommittee, should meet more often to improve financial management. And I think that's more around the agility. The more often the committee meets, it gives them the opportunity to take corrective action. So termly probably is not enough to take effective financial corrective action, for example. So they need to meet more often. And also, there's in terms of having visibility as a council, the council has somewhat limited oversight on that. So they can't really then report or correct non-compliance in those areas because they don't see that, they have no oversight. The second area in this is around responsibilities and roles, and that delegation are approved, and they are mostly, I think most of those are approved. Third area, or fourth area, looks at governors that have the skills to undertake their roles. They undertake mandatory training and they do that within the allotted timescale, and that's in place mostly. But there is I think an area that can be improved around training plans and skills need assessments for governors. Those generally do not take place in schools, so schools do not assess the needs that they need as a governing body. And again, I think additional corporate oversight about that position could help the council support that and then make sure that there is compliance in the longer term. And then finally, the full governing body minutes are generally meetings are minuted, but again, some of the less formal committees, like the subcommittees and other committees, there is no minutes of those meetings, or there's less minutes of those meetings. I'll move on to policies and procedures. Mandatory policies are mostly adopted and renewed on time. I think the areas of improvement should be around some slippage in the approval process. Sometimes it takes longer than 12 months. Sometimes they're not done. And the councils do not receive positive confirmation that those policies are in place. There's a requirement to do that, but that's not done. And then finally, there's some specific policies where there is a level of non-compliance, and that's around reviewing the fees and charges and the business continuity is in place. And then on to the governance, the finance aspects. Budget setting process mostly allows the governing body to challenge budgets, but sometimes governors find that process is not agile enough to allow them the opportunity to genuinely scrutiny budgets before they are formalised. So more agility around that area could allow greater scrutiny. Over 50% of the governing bodies receive regular budget monitoring reports from the school, which is good. However, on the flip side, 50% don't receive regular budgetary monitoring reports from the school. And clearly that's important because those reports allow governing bodies to manage the whole financial management process and have oversight over that. And then finally, we ask about the risk of fraud, and schools consider the risk of fraud at both head teacher and governor level. But I think there are aspects of that need improvement, and so I think there needs to be more corporate support in that, and I think certainly in terms of SWAT we can help with that. In terms of support and engagement, this is on governance still, the key takeaways. The relationship between the school and the governing body is excellent, which is what you would expect. From a school perspective, the relationship with the support that the school service provides is good. From the governing body perspective, the relationship and support provided by the school support service, again, is also deemed good. And from the school support perspective, looking the opposite way, it was also good, but there was areas of engagement around the school governor support team that needed to be improved. So that's the governance ones. I'll quickly move, Chair, because I appreciate. So again, in terms of background about roles and responsibilities, the school has a scheme for the financing of schools, and that's that has to be approved annually by POWIS, and that is a list or a document of guidance that both the local authority and the schools have to comply with. And in terms of the budget powers in there, because finance is going to be mostly about budget, the budget share, and as determined by the council, is delegated to the governing body. But the council has the power to suspend the school's rights to a delegated budget by giving them notice if they feel that the budget has not been managed satisfactorily. And then, again, as I said, as I did before with governance, what does good financial practice look like? Well, it's setting, reporting and managing a balanced budget. It's licensing and recovering budget deficits. It's preparing and communicating financial records. It's effectively collecting income and recovering debt. And it's operating voluntary funds and ensuring their audit sign off. And it's around financial control and best value in procurement. So there are less of these on the financial side. But again, similar from a positive assurance side in terms of financial management, the vast majority of schools feel they have reasonable, sustainable and flexible financial strategies in place. However, on the flip side, the POWIS Central Finance team feel that that picture may sometimes be overly optimistic. Schools indicate they have sufficient financial information from the Central Finance team to manage their budgets, so that's positive. And around half of the schools share monthly accounts with the finance team. So the schools share those with the finance team. But half don't, and that means that there is somewhat, again, limited visibility and oversight corporately with that. And then finally in this area, payroll expenditure is regularly checked. to make sure that employees comply with tax laws, and that's in particular IR35. So looking at procurement, payments to suppliers are reviewed by the school. VAT invoices are mostly attached to purchase cards and transactions, and as we mentioned today, that is an issue. But there are minority transactions that we can't claim VAT for because there are no invoices attached or no eligible VAT invoices attached. Periodic reviews are undertaken on spending to protect against fraud and error, so that's good. And some schools follow the council's no purchase, no pay policy for ordering goods and services, but some do not. Some obtain goods and then either raise orders or don't raise orders at all. So there's some commitment accounting issues going on there. And then mostly schools pay invoices properly. And two more areas quickly. On income, schools have income and lettings policies, which is good. Schools raise income, invoices to collect their income. However, sometimes where some of those debts are large, we would recommend that they use the in-house sundry debtor system because it has a much more robust and rigid debt collection process for defaulting debtors. Unofficial funds. Most schools prepare the accounts for unofficial funds. Some don't prepare them annually as they should. And so that's an issue. And again, council have no visibility about the compliance with that requirement at the moment. Some schools have their unofficial funds audited or voluntary funds audited. Some schools do not comply with that. And there's an increase of risk of fraud in that. And finally, schools maintain a separation of duty to make sure that their delegated funds and their unofficial funds do not cross over. And then finally, schools indicated that central finance teams supported and engaged on financial matters, and the central finance team indicated that the engagement with the school was adequate, but maybe could be slightly improved, I would guess. And that is the presentation, Chair. Any questions?
Thanks very much, Ian. Thanks for your presentation. Just to let colleagues know that the head, Richard Jenkins, and finance lead, Anne-Marie Lloyd, are now with us together with the chair, Rhiannon Evans from Brecon High, in preparation for the next item. And could I just extend my apologies to colleagues from Brecon High that we have been running a little bit late. Before we move to the Brecon High particular item, I am going to invite questions on the two thematic reviews, some themes from which we will see again in the Brecon report. I know, just reminding Brecon High colleagues that we are in a public meeting, and from my perspective, on the thematic reviews, one of the things that I'm really interested in is consistency, or consistency and variability where it exists, and to really understand the respective roles of head teachers, governing bodies, and the local authority. And particularly from the local authority, or officers, senior officers, I'm interested in how what's in these reports that will enable them to strengthen levels of consistency, reduce variability, and support through training and standardisation where standardisation is appropriate. So I'm really interested in the roles and responsibilities of the three respective players in this space: governing body, head, and officers. Respecting that each has a role to play, and inevitably none of those roles is ever easy. And at the heart of this is the education of the children in Powys, and let's not forget that at the heart of all this are our children, which is really, really important. So I'll open it for questions. I can see that Sarah already has her hand up, and Georgie and Mary. So I'll go in the order I can see you. It's Sarah, Georgie, Mary.
Thank you ever so much, Chair. I was just going to provide some updates against some of the elements that Ian raised around the governance thematic report. So looking at the skills assessment, we have previously issued a skills assessment document to support our governing bodies, but actually this year we're going to be asking for it to come back in. It's going to be issued to governing bodies next week, and we'll have a return date of the end of January to give governing bodies a little bit of time to work through that. And then we'll be using the information that comes back really to understand what the training needs across the authority are for our governing bodies, and then target those appropriately with the training brochure that goes out for the next academic year. In terms of training, our understanding of the training that governing bodies have undertaken, we did recognise that that was an area for improvement, and we have developed a central report which details what training has been undertaken down to governor level. And we recently created a training matrix for mandatory training and best practice training that went out to all head teachers for school staff. We're going to be replicating that for our governing bodies as well, so they've got that clear list of mandatory and best practice training. The fraud element came through, and actually it was really nice to hear Ian say that you know, SWAP would be a key partner in that, and we would hope to be working with SWAP Finance and the fraud team to be looking at sourcing information and training for our schools to support them with that element. In terms of the governor's support team as a whole, we already have a kind of clear action plan and working party in place to look at some of these key areas of development, and hence why the training report, etc., has come out. Out of that also has come a clerks forum, which has been put in place, and already discussions with them about how we can review and improve the process of informing the local authority about ratified policies. And then on the broader question about the report as a whole and how we will take learning from it, I think it's important that we take it to relevant fora to discuss. So, for example, whether it be our Governor Consultative Committee or Governor's Briefing and the Governance Working Group, and look at further improvements that can be made from the findings of the report.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thanks. That assurances and sense of continuous improvement is very, very helpful. I'm going to go to Georgie and then Mary, and I can see Councillor Gwynbor's hand is up as well. Georgie, then Mary.
Diolch yn fawr, Chair. I just wanted to also give reassurance around the finance element of that thematic report. We've given clear messaging to our head teachers as well as support regarding different elements of the finance. We recently presented to the area heads regarding the training, the appropriate use of purchase cards, offered bespoke cluster training as well around that. We've done significant work with certain secondary schools that have requested the financial deep dives, where we've begun to identify potential savings and support that can help if they're needing to write a recovery plan. We've also introduced a financial toolkit last September, which schools have begun to use to ensure those financial conversations at governing bodies are far more purposeful and linked to elements of work elsewhere, which has been shared further afield through Mari's work with other LAs. We also have the benchmarking tool as well that schools are using more effectively. So the schools that are using those resources, we are seeing that improvement in. There is still a case for further support for other schools, and we are aware of that. And when we're aware they're approaching that, we have sort of an additional layer of support that we've identified internally to try and support schools before they end up in a more difficult financial situation. The other element, particularly in the secondary sector, is the business managers. We are struggling to recruit business managers within the secondary sector, and currently have 4 secondary schools without business managers, and they are such key individuals when trying to support head teachers to manage their funding and their budgets effectively. So that is obviously a piece of work that we need to go do moving forward around how we support them with that. I think the other element for us really is that we regularly are communicating with our head teachers with the general budget picture. We have a meeting next week about that regarding, so that they have that information as soon as possible so we can support with that. So I think from our perspective around the general budget management and the pressures, we are working very closely with the schools and have been before this report was compiled, if you like.
Thanks, Georgie. Thank you. Mari?
Diolch, Chair, thank you. I think I was going to just come in on the relative roles that you were asking about at the start. So, as Ian mentioned in the presentation, in terms of the finance side of things, but I think this also, applies for the governance side as well. Really, on the finance side, we've got the scheme for finance in schools, which sets out some of those relationships as well between schools and the local authority. Excuse me, I'm a bit croaky today. I hope you can still hear me. So the responsibility in terms of being accountable for the financial performance of the school, making sure compliance with financial regulations and accountability for assets, that sits with a governing body. But they can formally delegate that, and it does need to be formally delegated and minuted. They can delegate some of the day-to-day financial and budget management responsibility to the head teacher, or and give the head authority to delegate some of those functions further down to members of staff as well. So they're also expected to receive, set the annual budget and make sure that they receive budget reports on at least a termly basis as well. But I think Ian said, clearly in the current financial sort of environment, there's questions about whether termly is frequently enough, really. But we support schools with that, and we provide twice yearly finance surgeries as well to work with schools and review where they are. And then I think there was around the submitting forecasts, we expect the 14 schools that have got or should have business managers and finance managers in place to submit forecasts on a monthly basis, and where we don't receive them, we do follow that up with the school as well. There's a range of different areas of support that we already provide to schools around training for governors, head teachers, and for the staff that actually do the input of the financial information onto the authority's systems as well, just to make sure that the records that they're monitoring against are accurate and complete. And I think there were a couple of areas within Ian's presentation around the transactional side of things, that maybe sort of in a minority of schools, whether or not the invoices are uploaded so that we can reclaim the VAT. Something, certainly an area to look at, I think, is around debt collection and whether invoices are raised on the system or not. And again, on procurement and purchase ordering in advance of the invoice arriving. I think that would be what we'd consider to be best practice, really. So so we are we have got some of that training in place, but obviously those are areas we need to sort of make sure that we cover within our training as well. I think generally in terms of how we can use this, we're developing and improving financial management in schools plan at the moment with Sarah and Georgie and their teams. So that will help. This report will help inform that plan as well for us to take forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mari. Thank you to officers for providing levels of assurance on this. It is complex, and a diverse base, but I think consistency to reduce variability and ultimately better value, you know, as maximize value for money for the benefit of the children that we're educating. So we need to think about how the committee can continue to receive assurance that these continuous improvement plans and the actions are delivering what we all hope they will deliver. But we can come back to that. I'm going to invite Councillor Gwynfor into to speak to this topic as well, and then I can also see Councillor Pete Lewington's hand up. So Councillor Gwynfor, you're very welcome to our meeting.
Thank you, Chair, and many thanks for allowing myself to piggyback into the meeting. I'm finding it very useful. I share your belief that we're looking for consistency and fairness right across schools. The one thing I picked up in the report that Ian delivered, and I certainly acknowledge the relationship between the school finance team and the work they do with schools has certainly improved over the years, and I think it's in a really good place. The one thing I did pick up on, though, Ian reported vast majority of schools reasonably felt that they had reasonably sustainable and flexible financial strategy, but there was a difference of opinion with the school finance team. You know, they didn't totally share that view. Ian, we almost need a ruling on that. You know, I find it quite worrying that schools feel that they are conducting their affairs, or the vast majority of schools are conducting their affairs properly, and the school finance team has a difference of opinion. So I think that's an essential piece of work here, that that relationship is examined, and what we're doing to correct that, really. It may be a very small difference, but I find it quite worrying that schools think that they're doing a capable job, and the school finance team have a difference of opinion.
Would Jane or Ian or Mary like to respond to that? Ian, we're going to Ian, and then we'll go to Jane, and then I'll bring Councillor Pete in when we're finished this bit of discussion.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just to comment on that, the report gathers the feelings, the thoughts, and of all the participants. Clearly, there is a conflict there that we rightly should raise. It's about perceptions, I guess, isn't it? And it's about the perception that the school may well feel that that these plans are sustainable, but it's right that we also have picked up the fact that maybe these are questioned and challenged, because ultimately it's the school that are responsible for delivering these, and it's right that the finance team challenge those. But I'm happy to go away and look at our work and see whether we can get some further analysis about what those concerns were. Happy to do that if it helps members, certainly.
Jane?
Yeah, just to come in on that, I think we're sampling a number of schools when we do this thematic review. You know, it's not the whole of the schools that have responded to this, so there will be varying opinions. I think sometimes relationships or comments can be reflected based on the level of challenge sometimes that the team put in. So it's to be mindful that occasionally governing bodies are not comfortable with that challenge, and they may react differently. But also we have a turnover as well in terms of governing bodies. So understanding isn't always where it needs to be across all governing bodies because of that turnover. So I think, you know, the schools themselves have a responsibility to make sure that governing bodies are aware of their responsibilities and role amongst this. And it's about that continual engagement and building those relationships as we go. So that would be my only comment.
Thanks very much, Ian, Jane. I'm going to bring in Councillor Pete Lewington and then Councillor Pete Roberts.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I suppose looking at the two themes there, I guess the finance theme, I can understand quite clearly in my head how you can audit that, and you know, you can review the figures. Does it add up? Do we get the supporting documentation, etc. But I guess when I look at the governance one, how do we go about assessing or passing an opinion on the effectiveness of that? So I suppose, for example, I've seen there that everybody's been on the training, so I've attended the training, but how effective was that? We've got committees there. Yes, I'm on a committee, but how effective was that? And again, I guess the old chestnut policies, we've got all the policies in place, they've been approved, but how are they actually used and how effective? So I guess how do you get a feeling for having ticked all those off, I guess, Ian, that around how effective they actually are in practice?
I think that's a really good point. The reality is that we look at the processes, and so we would make sure that those processes around policies, governance, decision making, that they are there, or that the framework is there to deliver those. We then have a process where we would go in and look at some of those areas to make sure that they comply, but certainly the first step is the frameworks. There is some then testing around compliance with those, but essentially if your framework of governance and decision making is working well, then that should then effectively drive all of the other parts. So there's less scrutiny around delivery of governance because that's the decision making process, but we scrutinize more so the framework around the fact that the process of governance is there rather than the actual decisions they make themselves, if that helps you.
Thanks, Councillor Pete. Thanks, Ian. Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. There's a few things I'd like to bring forward to you with hopefully will give you a little bit more assurance. Firstly, I welcome a number of the comments within the report, and I think they make some sobering reading for all of our governors, particularly around the need for an increase in the number of meetings of the finance committees of governing bodies, so that there is perhaps a slightly tighter eye the governors have on what schools are actually spending. So that's a positive there. In respect of my interactions with officers, I can give you assurance that there is a significant additional focus on support to governing bodies over the past 8 to 12 months. And we've been actively encouraging governing bodies to make their policies more transparent in terms of ensuring that the updated policy is always present on their website. It's not always come through, but it is something we're highlighting because that enables both the school, the governing body, our officers, and parents to see that schools are keeping those policies up to date. So that is welcome. The one thing I would highlight, though, is around the finance. And Georgie mentioned this in her statement, the financial deep dives that we are doing with schools. Sometimes they are not coming back with the most palatable of options for the schools, but we would encourage the governing bodies to engage with those in a great detail, because quite often they are coming forward with options that will give the school service greater confidence in the rigour of the budgets and the plans that schools are bringing forward, particularly in the high school sector, to get their budgetary position into a much more stable one. An example of that is the funding that has been put into the formula in the last budget round, where funding was identified for cover supervisors, both from the central service budget from the central support to the delegated budget, and then as invest to save modelling from the schools to actually employ cover supervisors to reduce the costs that they are incurring through the agency side. So there's a lot that has been coming out that will give greater support and greater confidence as we move forward in the budgetary process. I think that probably sums up my comments on this section for you.
Thank you very much. It's very helpful to have you in attendance and to to have those assurances. It's much appreciated. With an eye on the clock, and we are already running a bit behind, I am going to ask Ian to introduce his report on Brecon High, and then ask Richard Jenkins, the head, and I've just lost Rhiannon on my screen, and Rhiannon Evans, the chair, to introduce their responses. Moving to this item, I just want to assure everyone that we really want to understand what it's like from your perspective, and what it feels like from an auditor's perspective, from a senior officer's perspective, and from the school's perspective. We want to really understand how you see the world and what it means for each of the parties. But Ian, if you could move to introduce your paper.
Thank you, Chair. On page 451 of the agenda pack is the report we produced on Brecon High School. It's part of our 360 control assessment, as I mentioned. So on the second page, you'll see a sunburst chart. That's the way that we represent schools, and clearly what you see in green there, we are very happy with. What you see in blue there is the areas of minor non-compliance, amber, clearly more significant compliance, and then finally areas in red are areas of concern, importance and concern. So I'll briefly run through the headlines that are on page 453 of the agenda pack, and that looks at governance, and we determined that there are satisfactory arrangements in place, but there could be improvements to reporting of budgets to the governors, that the governing body need to approve the head teacher's roles and responsibilities and the delegation in place, and that statutory policies in place, some of those need to be reviewed. In terms of other ICT, again, positive assurance as a health and safety, that all the controls we expect to be in place are in there and operating effectively. Then on to procurement. It's slightly more mixed, that there's authorization and separation of duties to protect against fraud and make sure the approval and the spending of the budget is correct. However, some purchase card invoices do not have VAT invoices, and that orders are mostly prepared prior to goods being received, but some are not. And then finally, in the procurement area, we're looking at a delay in the purchasing of invoices, of payments. So there really are, I'll move on to the areas of concern, and those are the areas in red. Firstly, it's the financial area. And just to give you a little bit of background on that, we've carried out 3 audits at Brecon over the past 5 years. In 18-19, we did a full audit, and we followed up in May 21. In 18-19, it was limited assurance as well. In the follow-up, we looked at the school deficit, and at that time, it looked that there was an indication that the school deficit was going to be around £900,000 at this point in time now, at the end of this financial year. And we also had in that report confirmation that the school were looking to be in surplus from 21-22 onwards. So that's a bit of background and history. In terms of where we are in this report, on financial management, there's a deficit of £1.47 million at the end of 2023. Finance think that could grow. This could be 1.7 million. And looking at the school forecastings, there is a reduction going down to 27-28 to a 1.29 million deficit. So there are plans in place for a reduction. But my question or my comment to the committee is that we've had those assurances before, and they've not been delivered. So it's important that we solidify and make sure we have assurance that those plans and forecasts are reasonable and deliverable going forward. The budget is unlicensed at the moment due to its scale of debt, and there has been a warning notice that has been issued in the past. But however, there is a willingness within the school to improve this area without doubt, and there's been support that's been offered by Jane's team to help improve the budget situation and make sure that those budgets are achievable. The second area I'll just focus on is unofficial funds, or voluntary funds as they're also known. And a voluntary fund is any fund that the school hold that's not delegated, and that's for the benefit of the children of the school. And that could include monies like trips or other school activities. At Brecon High, they have a balance in that unofficial funds of 131,000, which is unusually high. And it's requirement of the school scheme of finance that those should be audited annually. Accounts should be prepared and they should be audited annually. Some of the accounts have been prepared, but none of those accounts have been audited for the past 5 years. So there's a risk, obviously, around having a crossover between the delegated fund and the voluntary fund. There's an increased risk of fraud and error, and generally there's a lack of transparency around those transactions to the school and the pupils. So those are the main areas, Chair. I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Much appreciated. I will ask the Chair of Governors and or the head to respond and speak to the situation from their perspective. I don't know who wants to lead off. Richard, Rhiannon. Richard, are you head?
I'm not.
Thank you. We can hear you.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm more than happy to begin our response. Firstly, I'd like to thank the staff involved with the audit process. It's been a very helpful process to be supported with. I'm hoping that you've received our improvement intentions in advance of today's discussion, where we've used the findings from the audit report and follow-on discussions with Gail and Kevin based at the audit company to look at how to go about actioning each of the priorities that we've been left with across the ranges that have been outlined there by Ian prior to me being able to speak with you. They cover all of the areas that we have been recommended to either continue with our work around in terms of things that were satisfactory, or aspects in the blue whereby we can continue to benefit from the advice we've been given, work with audit and school finance to continue our work on improving some of the areas that were identified, things around things like purchase ordering, invoices, etc., in the way that has been explained. So we've been using the advice already that we've been provided, and the action plan that we have provided is enabling us to use that advice to move forward on the things that have been left for us to work with. And we've assigned ourselves the deadline timelines that are outlined in the action plan as well, with the intention of informing the audit team upon completion of each action that is listed there in the improvement plan. In terms of the sections in red, if I can start with the section around unofficial funds. I have Anne-Marie with me, my finance manager, who hopefully can hear me as well, who I'm sure will want to contribute to this section as well. We've not been able to fulfill all of the auditing needs in that sense for the full 5 years due to some staff turnover in the finance section of the school. However, we have got, as it was listed on the report, fund accounts ready to be audited and are finalising a data disclosure agreement with an accountant, all of which we've informed our governing body around finance and premises for, and with their approval, we'll obviously be moving forward with that in the very near future, and with the intention then of annual auditing moving forward as a match of course from there. In terms of the budget situation, as has been explained, we have been trying to project it in your surplus position for a while and have been successful there at times over the last 5 years. The budget situation has been challenging for the school due to the size of the school, but also some of the financial challenges that are out there for schools at the moment, including most recently utility rises in the summer period coming into the autumn term, whereby some of our costs rose quite significantly in a short space of time. So we have had some challenge around being able to project in-year surpluses annually. However, by working with school finance in the way it has been explained by other people prior to me speaking, particularly with support of school finance team, surgery attendance, and any additional support we may want, and our involvement with our finance review and curriculum review, which was undertaken in January early this year. So we've used things like the benchmarking toolkit, the financial toolkit, etc., that were mentioned earlier. We are trying to be as robust as we can and as accurate as we can with our projections, and are currently projecting an in-year surplus for 25-26 and 26-27. There may well be some variables in there moving forward, but as things stand, we are projecting that, and we have shared all our financial information with school finance on a monthly basis, as I think Mary mentioned earlier, is what is expected. So that is taking place at the moment.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you, and thank you for the assurance that you're on the way to getting the unofficial funds audited, and for what sounds like the grip you're endeavouring to get over your in-year financial position. I'm going to open up the discussion to questions from members in the chamber and members who are online. Questions from committee members, please. Gareth?
Thanks, Chair. And what I'd like to see is linkages between, we've got as a base document the SWOT report, and we've got a set of actions coming from the school improvements team, and the headmaster there has just given us his school improvement plan, and you've articulated it visually there, is how do these link together? And then if we can see how they link together, we can start monitoring it and gauge the performance. At the moment, it seems a bit, there's an awful lot going on, but it seems a bit not joined up. I don't know if you agree with me or others.
I mean, what I'm hearing is a lot of commitment,
Yeah.
a lot of endeavour.
Exactly.
I'm going to bring Georgie in. I did see Councillor Chris's hand up, but I'm going to bring Georgie in because I suspect she wants to respond to Gareth's point.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chair. Yeah, really important question and comment. Brecon High School has its own school improvement plan as part of its PIAP, and within that, the fifth recommendation is linked to the financial management. So as a service, we are built into that PIAP with Richard and his staff in his school. So we work cohesively and collaboratively with them as part of their improvements. So whatever's in Richard's plan, we will be aware of it, because then we are working cohesively with the school. So we have a lead SIA that's there fortnightly, and also working with Richard and his senior leaders around all of the recommendations. But we are aware of the financial recommendations. So the work that we're doing cohesively links to Richard's improvement plan as well. The other element as well is that this school was one of the ones we've done a deep dive in more recently, and how that has led to some of the improvements that are being referenced there to help the school come into balance in the later years.
Does that help, Gareth?
Yeah.
Councillor Chris, did I see your hand up?
You did indeed, Chair. I don't know, my computer is playing up a little bit here. I'm not on the, so bear with me. I seem to be coming and going here.
Do you want to
Can you
answer
hear
the
me?
question, Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Richard, for the feedback. I think that's really helpful. In relation to the unofficial funds that haven't been audited, you mentioned that some of that is because of previous people leaving and stuff on there. How many years are you not able to provide comprehensive data for in relation to what you can now get adequately audited going forward? And then you mentioned utility costs coming through as affecting your main budget. I also read in some of the reports that there had been unexpected or unforeseen expenditure. Was that what you were referring to, or is there anything else in relation to that? Stop there for now.
Thanks, Chris. Richard, do you want to, can you respond to Councillor Chris's questions, please?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So yes is the answer, Councillor, in terms of the raises really. So just as an example, that's the only reason why I referred to it as an example whereby for a relatively small school like ours, managing the budget that we're trying to manage, especially trying to ensure that an in-year surplus can be achieved to avoid the overall cumulative position getting worse. Rises around utilities, as an example, are a challenge for a school in our circumstance. So, for example, where we've had rises for electric and the gas 159%, 172%, etc. These are challenges that they automatically put extra cost on your circumstance, and without necessarily having an in-year buffer in that sense, or a volume of money that can maybe absorb an extra cost that's sharp in that sense. That's an example of what I mean by sometimes the challenges are quite complicated to predict. In terms of the first part of the question, I believe the answer is 2. I'm just checking with Anne-Marie there, but I believe it's 2. But the annual usage there moving forward in terms of audit would be something that we do as a natural course of events each year based upon where we are now with more stable staffing from a finance perspective. Anne-Marie, do you mind just adding to that in case I've got that? If that's just checking that's correct.
Yeah, I think that is correct. I should add, I've only just recently started in September, so I am trying to find my feet with all of this. But I've got the current year's funds are up to date, and 3 previous years are ready to go to the auditor. So the audit report says that they haven't been audited for 5 years, which means it's the first 2 years of that we don't have sufficient information for.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Allard.
Good afternoon, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to join this meeting. I'm also part of the Learning and Skills Scrutiny and Chair of Finance Panel, so it's really helpful for me to hear from the head and his and his finance manager. I do not envy the position of the senior management team in Brecon. They inherited an incredibly difficult circumstance with a large deficit that has been there for some time. And clearly there's a real squeeze on the budgets of schools. Georgie did mention that deep dive over the summer, and I think the numbers that Ian quoted in his preamble to this report, it focused on the draft budget from May. And I understand the figures have got significantly worse in the next couple of years. And by the end, by the last year of this cycle in 26-27, it delivers a in-year surplus. However, the overall deficit remains roughly the same as it was, and about a £500,000 variance between the initial May budget and the latest ones. I'd like to understand the head, Richard Jenkins's, and also Anne-Marie and the Chair, Rhiannon's view of the helpfulness of that deep dive from County Hall, the support they've given you there. Clearly, the initial draft budget back in May was unrealistic. Whether all that change in year was due to energy costs and utility costs, or were there other factors involved in that as well? And crucially, as schools across Powys struggle to deliver in-year balances, I'd like to understand from the heads his views on the actions that he has to take to deliver any balance in 26-27, what impact that is having on the education of the pupils in his school. Dr. Cadeirydd.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allard. I'll hand over to Richard, and with an eye on the clock, I'm going to make Richard's response the last substantive item on this agenda item. Richard.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the questions. They're very, very helpful. So you're quite right, inheriting a very complicated picture at the time. At the beginning of the time I've been at the school, a lot of work needed to be centralised around what's a budget recovery plan, effectively, which was developed with Powys at the time, which at the time was very effective actually in helping the school move to an in-year surplus position within, I think it was three financial years, I believe it was. And at the time, we were able to do that because of our ability to take advantage in some ways of some of the changes that were going on in the school, particularly moving into a new building and some staff changes that were taking place. And so we were able to not necessarily have to appoint new staff. We could take advantage of retirements, etc. At the same time, in that particular moment, we actually costed what it would take to return to a zero position by the end of the financial year. And that would have, if that were to move forward, that would have been a complicated situation for the school in terms of staffing and potential redundancy scenarios, etc. But at the time, that wasn't considered to be suitable, and we all agreed with that because it would have led to increased average class sizes in some cases, and particularly potentially reduction in our curriculum offer. And we wanted to try to widen our curriculum rather than narrow it any further. And those sorts of challenges still remain in the air, really, even sort of fast forwarding three to 4 years or so. The combination of trying to balance your budgets when you're dealing with a very large deficit problem, and sometimes some variability in unknowns. And the utility rise I mentioned earlier is an example of what I mean by that, whereby we at the end of the last financial year, so coming into the new financial year, spring into summer, we're looking at where we were, and at that point, I believe our deficit was just under 20,000, I think it was, in sort of April, May time, which we were reporting to the governing body at the time. But then, unfortunately, things like utility rises, etc., which we all know we don't have limits on or caps on from a school perspective or organisation perspective, there's no protection there if you're in a small school and you've got a delicate budget situation to manage. If you get sharp rises in certain costs, that is going to impact upon your picture. So it has changed in a relatively short space of time. However, our plans using such things as Georgie mentioned, particularly earlier, the toolkit, etc., we are still able, working closely with Powys, to look at what the future years look like. And thankfully, we are projecting at the moment a surplus position. In terms of the beginning of your question, in terms of the benefit of the review that we had with Powys, the deep dive as it's being called, that was a welcome moment for us, and we were able to couple that with a curriculum review deep dive in the same essence as well, to be confident that our curriculum plan was meeting our financial plans at the same time, because both go hand in hand, obviously. And so that was a very beneficial experience for us, and one I'm sure we'd benefit from and welcome having again in the next round or at a suitable stage in the near future, because we want to be able to continue the conversations that have grown from that experience. That's been a really positive step for us as a school.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you,
Diolch. Sorry, Chair, I should really mention the thanks goes out to the staff as well as senior management, and also Chair of Governors. It's a hugely stressful position to be in, and it's important that we understand not only the welfare and the educational achievements of the children, but also the welfare of the staff as well. So, diolch yn fawr iawn, Richard.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. Ian, I'm just going to give a final opportunity for you to add anything or express any further views before I close this particular agenda item.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, from my perspective, the two issues still remain. So, you know, budget compliance, budget management, budget setting. It's about the delivery of that now, and you know, we will continue and we will revisit the school to undertake a follow-up to make sure that's happening, and we'll report back to committee. And in terms of the voluntary funds, I think really it's important that we move on this quickly, because I have, it's concerning that nobody scrutinised these records. And so if we can support that process in any way, I'm more than willing to help and support that process in any way that we can, Chair.
Thank you very much. I would just like to extend my thanks to everyone involved in this item, particularly the chair and the head and finance manager from Brecon High. I know you've taken time out of a very busy day to attend, and we're very, very grateful for your attendance and the assurances that you've been able to give us. We will welcome a revisited audit and a further report from Ian, at which time we may wish to talk to you again. But I will close this agenda item for now. And thank you very much for everyone who's joined us for this particular discussion. Really, really important discussion for the council and for the children of Powys. With that, I am going to take a 15-minute break from committee and reconvene. Well, we can have 17 minutes. We'll reconvene at 1:15. And apologies also to Gwilym, because we're running you late as well. Okay, stop recording and 1:15. Welcome, colleagues. Welcome to the afternoon session of the November Governance and Audit Committee. We're going to move to agenda item 10 and invite Beth Ann from Audit Wales to give us an overview of her report on Springing Forward Asset Management Review. And Beth Ann, apologies, we are late and I know you've got other commitments this afternoon, so thank you very much for bearing with us. If you could briefly introduce your findings, I'll then ask Gwilym to respond, and then we'll have some questions.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Can I just check, Chair? Can you hear me? Is
Yes.
my audio okay?
Yes,
yeah, great. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me, or having me back, I should probably say, actually. So yeah, as you've said, I'm here to introduce the Springing Forward Asset Management Report. So just by way of background, we looked at how the council strategically plans the use of its assets, how it monitors the use of these, and how it sort of reviews and evaluates the effectiveness of its arrangements. I should say this took place in every local authority in Wales. It wasn't specific to Powys. We looked at how councils were strengthening their ability to transform, adapt, and maintain the delivery of their services. Okay, so the key question we were looking to answer in this was, is the council's strategic approach to assets effectively helping the council to strengthen its ability to transform, adapt, and maintain the delivery of its services in the short and longer term? And just by way of context, this review took place towards the end of the COVID-19 pandemic, when there were lots of changes to the way assets were being used and the way workforce was being used as well. So overall, we concluded that the council has developed a clear asset management strategy, but not yet aligned the business plan and performance monitoring. So the three main headings out with the report were that the council has a clear high-level asset management strategy in place with links to the corporate and strategic equality plan. The council is collaborating with internal and external partners on long-term property-related initiatives, and the council has developed high-level key performance indicators, but there is opportunity to align and enhance business plans and performance monitoring. So what I'd say overall, Chair, this is a positive report. You know, there's some really good examples in the strategic asset management in the strategy. So it's just about making sure that the principles that were in there going forward became embedded in the operational arrangements that the local authority has, and in turn making sure that they are monitored effectively with appropriate measures linking to it. So I'm happy to take any questions if anyone's got any. Otherwise, pick up with your senior officers to talk about your action plan.
Thanks very much, Beth Ann. Does anyone have any clarification points for Beth Ann? If there are no clarification points, I'm going to move to get Gwilym to respond and then have a more open discussion after that. it would seem there are no clarification points, Bethan, so I'll ask William to respond and then we can have a Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome Audit Wales' report and accept the findings. We will ensure that the recommendations are addressed within appropriate timeframes. Progress on reviewing asset policies and plans has unfortunately been delayed as Strategic Property has had to balance these requirements with competing demands such as managing the return of house, project managing significant LUF projects, progressing a North Paris Wellbeing Hub, installing a new ICT system for Strategic Property, and embedding a corporate landlord, and also implementing a thorough review of the fire risk assessment process towards the end of last year. This all at the same time as reducing the staff resource, including the removal of the senior estate manager position from Strategic Property. Strategic Property are looking to progress with the review of the corporate asset policy and farm estate delivery plan by the end of the financial year. This process will help aid the alignment of our assets with corporate plan priorities, sustainable Paris aspirations, net zero carbon targets, and finally, the medium-term financial strategy, which is vital as we know that how difficult decisions will need to be made on what priorities we deliver with limited resources at our disposal, and assets will play a key part in that decision-making process, both from a revenue and a capital perspective. To aid the process, Strategic Property has been producing baseline evidence on the condition of our asset estate. We have completed condition surveys and net zero carbon assessments for our leisure estate. We have completed 130 of 134 condition surveys of our farm estate. We have commissioned condition surveys for our care home estate. And we're in a process of scoping out condition surveys and net zero carbon assessments with the Welsh Government for our school estate, which will hopefully be completed in the first half of next year. Strategic Property would like to continue with this process for all other asset types, as well as undertaking net zero carbon assessments of all assets that help inform a programme of works to ensure that the council works towards its targets of net zero. But I accept that this is dependent on resources being allocated. I think it is important to note that next year, Strategic Property, we will be looking to work with each service area to produce service-specific asset action plans. This will ensure that service delivery is at the heart of asset decisions and will hopefully help the council make the best use of its resources for both the short and long term. Finally, I'd like to thank Audit Wales for the work and assure the committee that this work is a priority and we're committed to ensuring that issues identified are addressed. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Gwilym. And I read the report with some interest because my perception is it's a potentially very, very far-reaching report. And, as you said, it touches on our climate change commitments. It touches on our financial sustainability future. It touches on our, because asset management is about so much more than asset management. It's very, very far-reaching. So I'm sure colleagues will be very interested in to have a discussion with you. So opening the floor, Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Bethan, and thank you, Gwilym. I'm chairing a subgroup of this committee, which was initially tasked with looking at the capital investment programme, but we quickly expanded the terms to taking a look at the existing asset base. So we've been working alongside you as we develop our thinking. And a couple of things which we as a group, emerging thoughts, have come to a head in Bethan's report. And I think the most fundamental thing, and you've hinted it as well, Gwilym, is something I raised earlier when I commented when we were looking at the signing off of the accounts of this relationship between the budgets, the strategy, where we're coming from, and the performance, where we're going to. Because the budget and our assets are means to ends. which are the outputs we're delivering for the residents and the visitors to Powys. So it's very well articulated in the Audit Wales report about this, reinforcing this linkage of assets. You don't have them for assets' sakes. I used to be a property manager and I used to think we did. I eventually got round to thinking that how do we, I think the fundamental question is that there's a recognition here, but how do we embed this, that it isn't Gwilym and his team's problem, it's everyone in the council. So I've pondered on this, and I think maybe this question should be asked as part of the integrated business planning process. Is when you ask people what resources do they need to deliver their outputs, the assets is part and parcel of that, and whether or not you need those assets. And so I would like to see that as part of the business planning process. So the people who use those assets, who I think know them best, help in that decision-making process. But then you're hogtied because business planning is only just looking at the next year. So then we've got to look at a longer time horizon, and by its very nature, as capital assets, if you're going to release them, or you're going to build new ones, or you're going to sell them or share them with someone else, you need that long term and that longer term time horizon. So how we integrate that into a longer term business planning and into the integrated 5-year financial plan, even if it's in embryonic form, I think would be very much a positive. And I also think we can get too much hidebound by financial returns, and there are a lot of non-financial returns as well, particularly, Chair, you mentioned around the net carbon, zero carbon agenda as well. So there's got to be a sort of objective and subjective assessment of how we make these decisions. And all this boils down to is what's going to drive this. And it's going to be sustainable Wales. Okay, it keeps on coming back to that. That's why I stressed this morning is that we've got to be part and parcel of how this is built up, not looking back at it because it'll be too late. And if the council is asking fundamental questions about what services it delivers in the future, what services it does deliver, stops delivering, cuts back, or gets other people to deliver, will exactly frame how we not only use our assets, but our budgets as well. And around this, we need a very robust and measurable set of performance figures. So I think there's some high level thinking and principles around this that I would like to see embedded in that from the ground floor of the Sustainable Wales process. Because, and the last point is, Sustainable Wales is going to be, if it's going to be a success, it'll be depend upon the degree and credibility of engagement with the customers, the residents of Powys. And we can talk to our heart's content about how we engage as a group, but I think there's a one chance in this one, and because you get consultation fatigue for people out there. So it's what the customer wants, and then how we translate it into our business planning, our long-term capital program, and also the strategy that the Gwilym's team then develop. But I've said all that, but as a group, I'd like to say, or besides all that, because you've had to do this whilst all that's been going on, Gwilym. And so you haven't sat back and said, we'll wait for that to happen. You've done an awful lot of the condition surveys. You've done most of it on the farm estate. That was a challenge in itself. And you've got some fantastic examples of good practice where part of this building, you've let to the Welsh government. They spent a lot of money investing in it, upgrading it. You've safeguarded and created jobs. You initiated a group of public bodies around the county where you have a clearinghouse of how can you share accommodation, make best use of it. So again, don't hide your light under a bushel. I think there's some very good practice as well. So there's an awful lot riding. So, yeah, there's an awful lot riding, and we've got to get it right around the sustainable Wales.
Oh, thanks very much for Gareth for all of that. I mean, I know it's only one event, but I've personally got hopes that when we have the next seminar on budget futures on the 4th of December, that we start to have some of those conversations about how it all comes together, because it's imperative.
Yeah,
it's absolutely imperative. Jane, I think you wanted to come in.
Just to come in, everything you described there is exactly what we're working on in the background.
Well, tell us.
Yeah, we can't tell you everything all the time.
Oh, no.
There's so much
No
going
secrets,
on.
yeah.
But I think, you know,
Good to hear, though.
everything that you said is part of Sustainable Powys. It's about the place-based planning that we're looking at. And it's not about what we've got now, it's what we need for the future. And absolutely every strand that you mentioned, we are building into that overarching plan. So, I mean, Gwilym and I work very closely together at a senior leadership team level, but it is about engaging the whole organisation and all of our services in that thinking, and our partners. As we've already commented on, in terms of the public sector and the financial challenge that we're going to see over the next few years, partners have buildings, we have buildings. We might not need all of those buildings, but working together, we can make it more efficient, we can invest more effectively, and all of that comes into it. So I just want to give you complete assurance that what you set out as the picture is what we want to achieve.
So that's fantastic to hear. The one thing I'd ask of you, Jane, is you've got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And one thing in your remit is the integrated business planning process. So there has to be quite a change in the complexion around that this year.
And if I can just pick up on that, I think integrated business plans will pick up at each service level, but I think the conversation needs to be had at a strategic level first. That will set the direction, and then inevitably you will have each of those service business plans that will come together to inform the financial plan, the capital strategy, and all of those things. So yeah, just yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Gareth. I can see that Matt's hand is up, and then Councillor Pete's hand's up. So I'll bring in Matt and then Councillor Pete.
Thank you, Jane. It's just more of a comment and picking up on some of the comments that's been made here today. So I've just taken on the role as interim director of environment, and Gwilym's here as sort of falls within that. So I'm still not like rabbit in the headlights, but still picking up, you know, some of those areas. And this asset review has certainly opened my eyes in terms of the future of Powys. So I'd just like to say, I do welcome the report, and just to give everybody assurance in the time that I am in this interim role, I will support Gwilym and his team in the delivery of these actions. You know, it's key that Gwilym and his team have that capacity to, you know, in terms of delivering this policy going forward. I think it's just worth noting, you know, we've got 650 assets across Powys. You know, the value of those assets, you know, is so instrumental, you know, in terms of what we do with those assets going forward. You know, invest to save. It's all these types of things we need to look at in terms of, I think some of the members have said about the sustainability of Powys. So it's just to give you that assurance, Chair.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's much appreciated. Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think Gareth's covered most of the points very comprehensively and thoroughly, so I won't go over any of those again. I just wanted to query why, though, if this review was done November 21 to May 22, and then it was updated in May 23, why has it taken so long to get to us? And is there any implications in that delay in terms of the information we're looking at?
I'm happy to pick that up, Chair, if you want me to respond. So we paused the review slightly while we were undertaking the review of planning services, because we try not to do sort of 2 reviews in one service in one go, because it's a lot for the teams to pick up. So we paused it for that. the report was actually sent over to you a little while ago, probably about, I'll have to double check, 2 or 3 months ago. I think it just hasn't been able to be fitted into some of the agendas. I think that's all it is. So it was paused for us to pick up some of the work in planning, refreshed, and I think it's just taken a bit of time to get onto the agendas, but it's been with the council for a little while now.
Thanks, Bevan. Thanks. Any further questions?
If I may, please, yeah. Sorry, I haven't got my council computer with me, so I'm not putting my hand up. Willem, I agree with basically everything Gareth has just outlined, and I'm sure you do too. A couple of points occur to me. After the reimagining session we had in the Gwalia, I wrote a note about what I consider to be a really good way of tackling the immediate problem we had on the revenue side, and that was to use asset sales as a funding for means of doing a number of quick wins, small spend to save projects, and I still think that's quite essential. The last budget, I think, had only around about 4 million, I think, of asset sales in there contributing to the capital. Can we be assured that we're going to be a bit more ambitious this time round? And I know we've beaten the 4 million already, so you're going to tell me that, but and I realise that, but I think we've got to be substantially more ambitious, and I think we've also got to be very ambitious about the way we spend that money. And then, if I may, then I'll move to Gwilym. You've got in your answer here about benchmarking. I think that's very important that we do that benchmarking. Can you tell us what particular areas you're going to try to benchmark first, and what progress you're making on it?
Yeah, Gwilym, if you think about your answer, Jane will deal with the asset disposal question.
Yeah, in terms of your question, John, we are at a point where a budget proposal is being formulated as we currently speak. It is very much my intention to be advising Cabinet and Council that capital receipts target needs to be more ambitious. Until we get through the whole process, obviously, you won't see what that looks like, but definitely is on my agenda.
Have you any idea yet how it's to be spent?
That will again fit in with our overarching capital strategy and all this other work that's going on to inform that. Once we have a better idea of what properties we need and where that investment then may be needed, we will formulate the capital financing strategy to accompany that. So we haven't necessarily got that all in place at the moment. In terms of spend to save, though, we have funding already set aside for spend to save. It's not capital money necessarily, it's reserve, but we can look to see how best we can use that. So through the Capital Oversight Board, if there are projects that are of that spend to save type, they come through that board for approval and consideration, again, based on business cases. So we can always look at appropriate programmes around spend to save.
Do we have an appropriate organisational structure to deal with small projects like this?
We do, I think, well, in terms of the process, yes, we do, because we have the business case.
The process, yes.
That's there. In terms of what they look like and whether we have the resource then to be able to deliver them, again, that's a key consideration as we look at the business case.
Thank you.
Thanks for your questions, Gwilym. I'm going to bring you in on the benchmarking point, but what strikes me from the conversation that we were just having with Jane about sort of in your budget planning, asset disposal, and what we invest the receipts in, and Gareth's earlier comments about the big picture and how the big picture fits together, for want of a better expression, and not to prolong things. But the latter part of the conversation is the operationalisation and the really, really tough decision making that is required, the in-year, real life tough decision making that is required once we've got the big picture that Gareth describes, and quite rightly describes, because you have to have the big picture, because that's where you're going, but then you have to make the really hard in-year decisions to actually get there. And then, as Gareth keeps reminding us, measure your decision making and provide assurance that you are actually stepping on the stepping stones to get to the big picture. And one of the things I personally really I'm looking for assurance, perhaps not today, but in due course, is are those really tough operationalising the strategic picture decisions, do we have the consensus? Will those tough decisions be taken? Because it feels to me, I mean, we've been saying this for, it feels like 20 years, but, you know, we are on a burning platform, and it's that sense of making the tough decisions once we've painted the picture.
I think that's a good comment, and I think as officers, I think we're clear, and we will be putting those decisions forward. It will then be down to Cabinet and ultimately full council at some point in terms of making those decisions and approving them. So as officers, all we can do is best explain, justify, to really make sure that they have enough evidence base and that collective position to enable them to make those tough decisions, because they will be tough.
Indeed, and you know, we are a democratic body, so ultimately it will be for Cabinet and full council. I completely respect that. I respect that. I did see, I think I saw Councillor Chris's hand up a wee while ago. Oh, sorry, Gwilym, benchmarking. Benchmarking, Gwilym, and Councillor Chris, if you could just put your hand up again if you do want to come in, please.
Just one comment on the 4 million. If we were to increase that, you have to plan ahead, because you can't just dispose of assets, you know, in 2 months' time. That's where I really think we need to get on top of how we're dealing with it, because at the moment it's mainly removing liabilities and rationalising our state that we're delivering that £4 million target. So anything more, we really do need to get on top of that now, sooner rather than later, in my opinion. But that's just probably a comment in a way. But benchmarking, we're starting to talk to neighbouring authorities about benchmarking comparisons with how their assets are performing against ours. What is value for money? But I think from reviewing a number of the reports from Audit Wales, benchmarking is a common theme, and therefore this benchmarking requirement is being discussed at Wales-wide forums about how best do we benchmark our assets to make sure that we can demonstrate that the public are getting value for money and that the authorities are delivering. I'd like to say that we're at the end of that work, and here are the suite of KPIs for you, but we're not. So at the moment, I'm very much looking for us to compare with neighbouring authorities so we can get some sort of information out there. I'm also looking for us to compare ourselves with the private sector. I think we can't just narrow ourselves down just to comparing against Carmarthen or Ceredigion, for example. We have to see what's the private sector doing in Paris, Wales, UK, to make sure, again, a lot of our, especially our commercial estate, is that delivering value for money. So we are undertaking work, but we're not there. It is an item for that needs to be addressed for our integrated business plan to be adopted next year, so that then is reported to Cabinet members. But we're not there yet. It is a work in progress, but we are doing it. And consortium of local authorities in Wales, it's been highlighted there, and that's where it hopefully will be addressed Wales-wide. Hope that answers your question, and I know there's work in progress.
Yeah, look forward to hearing progress.
Yeah, thank you very much, Will. I've got Councillor Chris and then Councillor Pete, and then Councillor Pete's question will be the last question on this item, then we'll move on. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I agree with a lot of the comments that have already been made, but my one is in all of this process, as we're looking through, particularly how we change service provisions going forward and get a sustainable POWIS, is that we need to remember that other aspects of the public service are being affected locally as well. And just putting a plea out that we engage with other key partners within it so that we don't go into a silo mentality, because that's sometimes what happens. Our plans as a local authority will have implications to others. Likewise, if, for example, the health board make changes, that will have consequences for the local authority. And it's about ensuring that we're sure and engage in that process. And I just want the assurance that that is happening behind the scenes.
It's key to how we manage our assets. So it is happening behind the scenes. We're having dialogues with key partners. And we're also looking to go out as far afield as we possibly can, including the hard to reach parties. It is a key aspect going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pete.
Yep, thanks, Chair. I guess just listening to the comment earlier on about a bit more ambitious on our capital receipts programme, and then I was just looking at one of the responses here, where it says the council is undertaking a review of blah 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 county farm estate delivery plan. I just wanted to check exactly who the council is in this instance, and when that review's been completed, where does that review get reviewed and signed off?
Well, the council is the whole organisation, but at the moment it's with officers to actually bring that forward for cabinet and council to decide. So inevitably, in terms of, I'm not sure with the asset policy and strategy where that gets signed off. It could be cabinet. I'm not sure if it needs to go to council. I'd need to check on that. But of course, it is council's responsibility to sign off the capital strategy as part of its budget process. So inevitably, you will see the output of that strategy as part of that. So council will itself have a role in that to approve it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much for your question, Councillor Pete. We could spend the whole afternoon on this topic, and I'm sure there will be further opportunities to do so, but thank you very much, Gwilym, and thank you for your patience, because we did hold you back from other commitments, but I need to move the agenda on because we're already on a bit of a, we're already taking too much time over the meeting. My fault entirely as chair, but thank you very much. I'll move us on to agenda item 11 and ask Nina to give us her update on the corporate safeguarding board activity report. Nina, the floor is yours.
Diolch, Chair. Thank you very much, Prynhawn Da. Good afternoon, everybody. Just aware of time, so I'll only very briefly introduce the report and then happy to open to questions from the committee. So the report in front of you this afternoon relates to activities from the meetings of the Corporate Safeguarding Board held on the 4th of August and the 15th of September. As at all of our board meetings, we look through detail at the progress against actions on the Safeguarding Regulatory Tracker. Progress was noted with 9 actions rated as green, which is on track, and 1 as amber, which was slightly off track. The recommendation noted as amber relates to clarifying expectations of contractors in respect of safeguarding training. So in the board, we went through in detail the achievements that have been achieved against that action and what the future actions will be in terms of it as well. We discussed the annual safeguarding self-assessment audits, and the board were informed that a dashboard has been built, putting together all of the actions to be monitored and progress tracked. Work is underway with heads of service to update that tracker. The board were shown a presentation about the implementation of a tiered approach to contract management, prioritising resources for top-tier contracts. And it was suggested that schools might benefit from accessing contract management awareness training as well. There was a discussion around channel and community safety partnerships arrangements, and it was agreed that colleagues will go away to review the current arrangements and come back with proposals and options for a future meeting. Preparations for the National Safeguarding Week and the conference that was hosted by Powys County Council were noted in the Bourne meeting, as well as the introduction of Spotlight on Safeguarding, Themes of the Month updates. The board were also informed that the White Ribbon Day is 25th of November, which is tomorrow. And if I may, I'd like to take the opportunity to remind everybody that we are hosting walks around the county tomorrow at 11 a.m. And if anybody is able to join us, we're really welcome to see you there. Reports by exception were received in terms of young people's housing, safeguarding in education, mandatory safeguarding training, adult social care, children's social care as well. The board noted the forward work programme with other business including receipt of a volunteering for Powys County Council policy and a safeguarding vlog for members and governors as well. The future meeting and the next meeting is 14th of December. So I'm just aware, I hope that's okay for you, Chair. If I pause there, I'm happy to take any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nina, and thanks for your very brief run through the report with which we are becoming familiar because you give us a really regular and thorough updates. Thank you. Councillor Pete, is that a new hand? Was that an old hand? No. John has a question for you, Nina.
Yeah, thank you. We did ask at the last meeting where the council stood in terms of insurance when compliance wasn't at 100%.
I'm sorry, John, I don't recall that question. Could you just run
I'm
that?
on the report here. I'm sorry, I've scrolled to the wrong report.
No problem at all. You threw me then.
It's wishful thinking.
Nearly, but not quite, John. I'll just pause. Does anyone have any questions for Nina? Okay, I think we have noted the report, and thank you to Nina for the efforts of yourself and your team in providing it. It is, and we have no questions. Don't imagine that is a representation of our interest. We are really interested in this report and very, very grateful to receive it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
Thank you. Moving on, colleagues, to deep dives. We are having a deep dive today, agenda item 12 on EDR 11, which is the climate emergency. Diane Reynolds is with us, and also Ellen Sullivan and Tom Yeo. Diane, I know you have to leave, and with my profuse apologies, we have been running a bit poor on time, which is my fault entirely. I'm trusting if you start us off, please, and that you'll leave us with Ellen and Tom to continue the item, if that's okay.
Well, Chair, I was just going to suggest to give this item the time it needs to consider climate, which is one of our highest risks in the organisation, whether we could put back this item to the following meeting in January, just because obviously you do need time to consider effectively, and we've only got 8 minutes left in the meeting. So with your permission, I'd like for us to come back in your January meeting.
How do people feel about that? Yep, everyone seems to be happy, Diane, and I apologise, but welcome your suggestion. So thank you very much. I will take responsibility for managing our timing more effectively in January, so that you get a proper amount of time for your work. And apologies if you and your team have put a lot of prep into this, but I'm sure it will serve its purpose in January.
Not lost at all. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks very much. Much appreciated. The gift of time from Diane, as long as we can reschedule for January. Okay, that means we move on to the working group report. Agenda item 13. So we are formally postponing agenda item 12 until January, and we're on agenda item 13, and the paper associated with this is the update report from the internal audit working group. This would be our third meeting. And I am happy to take questions, and Ian, as my right-hand person in respect of this committee, is here too. My assessment is that this committee is actually starting to make some really good progress and is covering some really interesting business on behalf of the full committee. But Ian or I would be happy to take any questions should members have any questions to ask us. John.
I think I'm in the right place now. I did ask where the council stood in terms of insurance when plans were not 100% when we had the
housing
statutory compliance. You're going to come back to me.
And I've had a response. I'll make sure I forward it on to you.
We covered it.
I'm not 100% sure. Let me carry on. And
Yeah,
I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, because we had another detailed follow-up discussion with statutory compliance in the housing stock area. Right. While Jane's looking for that, is there anything to update from any of the other working groups or from finance panel? John.
Yes, in terms of the House working group and the H&A working group, I received compiled draft reports, but I want this to go to but I want those to go to a final committee meeting just to ratify it and make the necessary changes and make sure that the whole committee is on board before we put them together as recommendations to cabinet. But in terms of the meetings, the investigations are over. And in terms of the highways, we've received the follow-up reports from internal audit, which don't give us any areas for concern and don't contradict any of our findings. Thank you.
Ian, do you want to add anything to that? Oh, okay. Gareth?
Yeah, just to update you, Chair, on the working group on the capital programme and the assets. I prepared a first draft, which is pretty well a discussion document from which we'll draw our conclusions. And I'll be updating that in the light of the Audit Wales report and Gwilym's response today. So Kath has gone out to get some gaps and missing information, and we'll be having that meeting in early new year of the group.
Excellent.
To consider the document.
Excellent, thanks very much. You know, it feels to me as though the working groups are really starting, well, actually not just starting, because John's working groups have actually made some significant progress, but they are starting to feature in the progress that the committee's making. So,
and I think
thank you.
You'd agree, John, that there's specific conclusions and recommendations relating to topic, but these have raised more fundamental issues, which I think as a group ourselves needs to go and be reported back into the cabinet.
No, absolutely. It's not just the narrow focus of the group.
Yeah.
We have all raised broad
working group structure is a very successful way of doing it.
Yeah.
It's a very fruitful way.
Good, and thank you for everyone, because it is more work and extra effort, but it is paying a dividend, which is important for our work. I think Jane may have an answer. John.
Yes, I do. So in terms of the insurance, I think the wording on our insurance policy is that the council is taking reasonable precautions to ensure its compliance with statutory obligations and various elements of that. So I think if we weren't at 100%, as long as the insurers have assurance that the procedures are in place and it's a one-off instance, then that wouldn't jeopardise our insurance arrangements. Probably as you'd expect, to be honest, but that's sort of the way the insurance policy would run.
We've got to make sure we stay on top.
Absolutely.
We've got to make sure we stay on top of our inspection schedules, then, haven't we?
Yeah.
Which comes back to a question of resource, which we raised the other day.
Absolutely.
Happy to move on? Item 14, which is the work programme. Connor, we've probably picked up quite a lot as we've been going through the course of today's agenda. Can we just focus on the 8th of December, which is an extra meeting? The original reason for that meeting was because Yscol Callan Cymru colleagues couldn't make today reference internal audit. So we've scheduled that, and the school team are available. Since then, what did we add earlier? Red. Yes. Did we add? No, we were January for Red Dragon. Yes. Yeah. Procurement and contracts on the 8th, and the Red Dragon work that Ian's team is doing for January, because you're never going to get to the 8th on that, are you? But my intention is to keep the 8th as a short focused meeting, because it was an exceptional meeting and I don't want to risk it turning into a 6-hour meeting. So we'll try and keep that really tight. And then in January, we would have the Red Dragon work, digital strategy review, finance phase planning. So actually we've got nature emergency on there. So that actually, so I'm going to say let's make a virtue of necessity. Because one of the challenges I have to the strategic risk register is that EDR 0011 and HTR 0018 nature emergency need to be looked at together, because they are not the same. One's a nature emergency and one's climate change and net zero and all that. But I really feel that there are common themes in there. So whilst we need to give Diane and her team the due respect that I failed to give them today, but Jane, at a senior level, could you take that away? Because I think there is something in the mitigations around a nature emergency. And
Ellen is still.
Oh, Ellen's still here, yeah. Okay, but we don't need to go into the detail of it now, but if someone could just think about that. But and definitely give the climate change team space on the 12th of January, because we messed up for, well, I messed up for them today. If we can do both in terms of the time we've got, all well and good. March, our deep dive will be fraud. Good. Anything on any comments on the forward work plan, or anything that you can think of that is glaringly missing? But Connor will have been capturing things from today. Whistleblowing, Jane, is in as a possible thing for January. When might we see a whistleblowing policy?
We do have a whistleblowing policy, but it was around the reporting around it, wasn't it? So we've been chasing that with Clive's team, haven't we, in terms of that? So we'll follow that up, but it does need to be scheduled on the programme. And I think that's what we've asked for, really, isn't it, Connor?
Right, okay. So and then the other one that I'm interested in is what do the changes to the global internal audit standards mean ultimately for the committee? That doesn't have to be in January. And I think probably, Connor, it could move, given what we're going to have quite a meeting in January. But Jane and Ian, if you could do a bit of thinking together as to what those changes will ultimately mean, if anything, for the committee and the way it works. Any other comments on the forward work plan? I think what once we've had time to take stock following today's meeting and finalise the next two agendas, we'll have another stock take of the forward work plan, Connor. But it is it's certainly clearer it's much clearer than it was this time last year. So thanks very much for that, everyone. Okay, if there are no other comments on that, we'll move on to item 15, which is the strategic risk management. Jane, do you want to say anything by way of introduction? Councillor David is going to do. I'm ever so sorry, Councillor David. I can see that you switched your camera on. I'm not looking in the right direction.
That's all right, Chair.
Is going
no
to
problem.
introduce
yes.
this item.
As Beth isn't with us, I'll just give, and for the sake of time as well, I'll just give a high-level overview of the strategic risk report for Q2. So at the end of Q2, 23-24, there are 15 risks on the strategic risk register, and all strategic risk owners have provided a short summary of progress since last quarter to give assurance that mitigating actions are being actioned and monitored. Appendix A contains full details of the 14 strategic risks, including the mitigating actions identified to control them and progress reviews, and Appendix C in relation to ASC 0066. Appendix B is the heat map, which presents the results of Q2 risk assessment, which is processed visually. 5 out of the 14 risks have a probability of likely and an impact of major. 1 has a probability of almost certain and an impact of major, and 1 has a probability of likely and an impact of severe. Section 3.5 of the report lists 4 risks that have changed their probability. 2 have gone up and 2 have gone down. And section 3.5 highlights the de-escalation of a risk. 3.6 highlights a severe service risk that's scored 15 or above, and that's in children's service. The detail is contained in the report, which I take you've all read. And there's reference made in 3.7 to a closed session risk. I believe we discussed this earlier, and I think there was some mention that it was going to be in the January session. I'm not 100% certain on that, but I wouldn't want to comment that. To the best of my knowledge, there's been progress made over that risk, but I wouldn't want to comment on it. It'd be better coming from the head of service. But that's the high-level overview of the strategic risk register at Q2, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor David. Much appreciated in Bet's absence. Any comments or questions on the strategic risk register, please, colleagues? If there are no questions,
Sure.
Sorry, John, go ahead.
Sorry, I haven't got my hand thing on
no,
this
you haven't.
machine. When we had the presentation the other day of the from the corporate risk corporate protection risk register, I was very concerned about the level of resource in certain areas. I mean, for example, I think it was said that farming was now on a sort of 20-year rolling program of inspections. I know there are other inspections involved with farms, and I'm not an expert on it, but it did seem to me that we were building up risks in this area. Perhaps we ought to be considering here at a corporate level rather than at a departmental level.
What do you mean, the specific inspection?
Yeah, I mean, yes, literally specific inspections and the levels and rates of those inspections, whether they be, I mean, they're taking, we're making those inspections to protect the public. Mm-hmm. And if we miss out on protecting the public because we haven't done an inspection, that's a major risk.
I think I mentioned at the session that obviously it'll be for the service area to identify that risk and include it in the service risk register. And if it did score 15 or above, it would be reviewed by the senior leadership team. And then they'd if they saw fit, they'd escalate it to the strategic risk register. But I haven't seen that service risk register, so I can't comment on that. I don't know if Jane would like to comment on it.
David, I do appreciate that, you know, what we're talking about is additional money when we can't afford it. No, I'm well aware of that, but I do think it needs a second look from what we heard the other day.
Okay, so can I suggest that that we have an action point where this committee is seeking assurance from the service that that specific risk is being managed through its risk register and resource allocation prioritisation. As Councillor David said, it may not be something that escalates up to strategic risk register, but we're seeking assurance, given what we heard on Monday at the session, that it is definitely being managed at service level.
We can't know enough about it from a small presentation like that in a very confined length of time, but it needs more careful consideration.
Yeah, I think it does appear to be a concern, the limited information we did receive, John, so I'd agree with you there that the chair's quite correct that we asked the service to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, this committee can ask for assurance that it is being dealt with by the right people in the right part of the county council. So thank you, Councillor David and John. We have a way forward on that one. I think, John, picking up the theme, what really seems to me to be a theme that we're encountering repeatedly is that in various services, and by virtue of the whole purpose of this organisation, there are significant skills and resourcing issues in various areas which are going to mean that we encounter risks and that the people of Powys encounter further risks in terms of skills and capability and the council's ability to pay for those professional staffs. That feels to me as though it's a bit of a recurrent theme, whether it's in social work or secondary school business managers, as we already heard today, or animal inspection. It just feels like a capability, capacity, retention and recruitment, and ultimately a financial issue. And I don't have a solution, but it feels as though it's a recurrent theme.
I agree we don't have a solution, but I think we do need to look at it and be seen to be looking at it.
Yeah, and planning was another area in terms of that we heard that Gwillim's staff were getting poached for hire. Paid jobs but on the upside we had a really good presentation 2 or 3 meetings ago from the social care team about the grow your own methodology of developing your own talent, having your own academy as it were, and so perhaps there is mileage in that approach for Powys Skills Academy to grow our own. So hopefully there is a way forward in that. Councillor Pete, your hand is up and you've been very patient.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just looking at paragraph 3.5 where the risks are changing their probability and impact. And I guess when I look at the one global supply chain, that's gone from possible to unlikely when, as we all know, unfortunately, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is still ongoing. And then when I look at the other one, nature emergency one, that's gone up to 6. And I might be answering my own question because the information may be in the detail in the strategic register, so apologies if it is, but I didn't know if perhaps going forwards we might also be able to have a little bit of a commentary as to why those scores have changed rather than just seeing the risk again.
Yes, I think that's a really good point. Councillor Pete. Jane, could you perhaps
Yeah.
help us out there?
I think, you know, you see a snapshot here, don't you? Not necessarily the full risk register. I mean, in terms of the supply chain, just immediately after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I think everybody saw quite an upset in terms of that supply chain. And I think over that period, we've been monitoring the situation, particularly through the Commercial Risk Board, and we found solutions to some of those problems, and the situation isn't as worse as it was at that period of time. So I think based on that and knowing that we can access what we need at the moment, that's why that risk has been scored lower than it was previously. So I think we have more comfort that we can routinely get those supplies and services that we need at the moment on that one. The other one wasn't one of mine, was it? Which one was this? Yeah, I don't know if Ellen's still with us and whether she wants to pick that up, or perhaps that's something that can be picked up.
Ellen's, she's coming.
Hi.
It's not
sorry,
you.
with the nature one, Jane, I think I'd rather pick that up maybe next time with Sian Barnes. I know she's on leave at the moment. But that risk, is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Sorry, Jane, the nature.
Yeah.
And I think it links with the highways risk. They've identified it as a risk. And I know, Chair, you raised with me already that we have two quite similar risks on the risk register, and we need to do that cross check across them, and perhaps in a little bit more detail, and only perhaps feature one then on the strategic risk register. But we'll take that on board and go and have a look at that outside of the meeting.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yep. I went through the strategic risk register in some detail yesterday or the day before, and I think that it needs to be strengthened a wee bit. Some places we've lost the if this then formulation, which is it's really simple, but it's really helpful for risk management. If this risk happens, if this thing happens, then this is the risk. And we've lost it in some places. So I think I would quite like them all looked at in that respect. I've already mentioned the nature one linking to the climate one. And there was another couple that I thought really looked rather similar in Gwillim's area.
Yeah.
And some of them, I would quite like, I think, picking up what Councillor Pete said, a better understanding of the scoring and the inherent and the residual, and what has led to the different scores between inherent and residual, and where and why they have changed. The other thing that rather worried me was and I know Bets has explained this to me before, that the actions and controls that we see are not the full suite, but notwithstanding, it did feel that in some places the controls and actions that we see here were quite administrative and transactional, and something's being developed, keep an eye on this, report that, against hugely worrying potential consequences. And I don't think that necessarily gives this committee the assurance that it requires. And our role as a committee is to seek assurance on the effectiveness of the arrangements in place in the council to manage risk. So we're not managing the risks, but we are seeking assurance on the effectiveness of the arrangements in place to manage risk. And my response to that is that I think the strategic risk register needs a bit of tightening up and a bit of cross-checking. so as not to prolong matters today, I think what I'll do is I'll send yourself and Bets a longer version of the email I sent last night with my detailed comments on the risk register, and I'll share it with colleagues in the committee and of course Councillor David as well. And we can move forward. I'm not saying that my comments are necessarily right, but just to share what's in my head. So as not to prolong things. I can see that Ian wants to come in, and I had been going to bring you in, but you might be about to see what I was going to ask you anyway, so I'll give you the opportunity to do it first.
I'm not sure about that, Chair, but just a comment really. In terms of what we're seeing across the partners in SWAP and the risk universe, the thing that's affecting them all and is rising rapidly is around financial sustainability. And it's staying stable at the moment, and I just wondered whether Jane foresees that changing in any way, shape or form in the future.
Can you just repeat that bit? I was just responding to Ellen, who was asking about the process around risk. Apologies.
I was just saying that over the partners, across the partners of SWAP, we're seeing financial resilience and financial sustainability as the most increasing risk at the moment, given the financial situation. And I just wondered, it's stable in the risk register at 16 at the moment. Is it likely to increase over the next kind of 6 to 12 months?
I think in terms of the prospects around public sector finances over the next couple of years, and we were all very keen to keep an eye on the autumn statement yesterday to see if that was given us any indication of additional funding coming through. I think it's clear to say that wasn't the case. So I think in terms of the financial challenge and future settlements, we are concerned and we do believe that that's going to be a significant challenge for everybody in the public sector. So I think the level of risk is definitely increasing there. In terms of how we manage that and our approach to that is going to be fundamental, and our financial resilience is absolutely key to that. So yes, I think this particular risk has gone up and down over a number of years. You know, when we first saw COVID hit and the financial position then looked bleak until we had that support from Welsh Government. So absolutely, we are keeping a constant eye on that particular element and factoring that into our risk analysis.
Is it right if I come back? Just to add a different point, and probably what the Chair's thinking about is, in terms of the risk process in general, I think it's important that in time we need to look at something that's a bit more horizon scanning. And so, you know, some of these things are of the moment, aren't they? And so I think it's important that we do have looking at things that are on the edge, on the horizon. I'm more than happy to help with that if we can in SWAP, certainly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ian. That's exactly what I was hoping we were going to say, because we had previously talked about SWAP doing that kind of horizon scanning risk work, which would be incredibly helpful. Not just your role in our council, but the whole organisation being in that space, which would be helpful to learn from other authorities and from colleagues. Ian, that's your hand is up. I'll just pause for any further comments on the risk register. And whilst I'm saying that I think it does need a little bit of a look to at the moment, the strategic risk register, that is not to underestimate the work that Bets does and the amount of work that goes into risk management and the authority. I know it's absolutely huge, and I know Bets does an enormous amount of work, but typically risk registers every so often do need a little bit of a refresh, as many things do. It's an inevitable process in risk management as large complex organisations ebb and flow. Thank you very much then. So we have done the work programme, we've done risk management. I'll send more detailed comments. We are not doing item 16. We're going to keep that till the 8th of December, Connor, which means we are not doing item 17 because that's what we're keeping until the 8th of December. Therefore, today's meeting is closed, and I wish to thank all members, officers and guests for their contributions today. but not just their contributions today, but all the hard work that goes on to making today an effective meeting for us all. So thank you very much, and safe journeys home. Thank you. Thanks.
Can I say something?
Thanks, Chair.
Recording is finished.